under the cabinet must be stepped down.
Why?
Because they're elderly, Cathy. No, they're elderly.
Okay.
Because they're above 65, Cathy. They must step down. Now, I'm happy they're all gone. Only Njimucheka, where she's remained, Njimucheka must step down. She's elderly.
Okay. Lerotodi out in Brakpan, yeah. Let's leave it there. And again, it comes to the difficulties of navigating it. And I mean, even their officers don't want to say that they are old, right? But it's a reality. It's a reality of life. How do we begin to actually call things as they are? It's 9:30. Time for the latest headlines.
Good morning. In the headlines, the Judicial Conduct Tribunal is today expected to reconvene for hearings in a probe against suspended judge of the Gauteng High Court, Nana Makubele. Financial expert Prem Govender has advised South Africans against the premature withdrawal of their retirement funds. She was reacting to the Pension Fund Amendment Bill that was signed into law by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And leaders and senior politicians around the world have paid tribute to US President Joe Biden following his decision to withdraw from the presidential race. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
The reality is that 90% of South Africans don't save enough for retirement. This National Savings Month, why not be part of the 10% who do? Choose an interest rate of up to 12.6% after 60 months with the Nedbank Electronic Optimum Plus account. Anyone over 55 can open theirs via the Nedbank Money app in less than 2 minutes. Join the bank that's best for your savings goals. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
Every year, 30,000 missionaries are called to serve the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints across the globe, the largest full-time missionary force of any church. Most are under 25 and away from home for up to 2 years, and the biggest training center in Europe is located in Chorley, Lancashire. The Mormons Are Coming follows the journey of 3 young missionaries through the first few months of training and work in the field, which can make or break them. Tune into The Mormons Are Coming, Thursdays at 10 p.m. Channel your best dockies with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Cathy, good morning. It's Clinton here. Cathy, for whatever Biden's reasons are, one thing we should applaud Biden is that the man knows it is time for him to go. The same way Biden has given up, the same way your Jacob Zuma or our African leaders should give up. Really, man, I think perhaps sometimes our African leaders, the biggest problem is they don't know when to concede to power, when to allow that power to go. But really, we should applaud Biden. The same way I want Jacob Zuma to say, guys, you know what, name? I've done as much as I possibly can, but from here on, I can't do anything much more.
Good morning, Cathy and the listeners. With regards to the age of these presidents, who actually choose them? Do they place themselves?
Good morning, guys. All the listeners and you, Mrs. Cathy. Happy Monday, guys. Sia from Cape Town. I like to see Mrs. Cathy. What is the feedback actually from America? Because I see it's gonna be amazing competition. So I want to know if maybe Donald Trump he can become again to be a president of America or what. I can't wait to see that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for those WhatsApp voice notes. You're right in that it has become an incredibly interesting presidential campaign given this latest development. Nolene says, Cathy, you're so right. Generally, companies will insist on retirement at 63 or 65, but countries are led by people who are 10 to 20 years older. An age gap should be placed on leadership. Yeah, thanks for that view, Nolene. Matuka, you are in Matlosana. Good morning. You also want to talk about Joe Biden.
Yeah, Asketi, good morning, Siswan. It's Atuka again.
Oh, it's Atuka. Apologies, yeah. Yeah, Lebo says sorry. Go for it, Atuka.
All right. I just heard that voice note about Joe Biden being this example.
Mm-hmm.
Let us not kid ourselves. I think, Asketi, we've all been following my favorite series, which is the American politics. Joe Biden was forced out. He did not want to go. He was forced out after that dismal failure in that debate with Trump. It became clear that he's not there mentally. It was never about his age. It was always about his cognitive ability. And he still refused. He said that the only thing that will take him out are medical reasons, not political reasons. But the polls were always consistently showing that you are going to lose to Trump. He had a big boy press conference where he confused Zelensky for Putin.
Vladimir Putin,
and then he called President Trump his vice president.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was all there, and then Trump got shot, and then the internal pollings of the Democrats were saying that, Joe, we are not going to win with you, and you are going to cost us the Senate and the Congress. At least if we don't have president, let us retain the Senate or the Congress. He was forced out.
Yeah, look, I can't disagree with you, because we've all been watching the signs. We've all been watching the signs. And I was just thinking as you were speaking, Atuka, because the debate was when it really came to the fore. And we know that there's supposed to be, I think, at least 3 more debates before the actual election. And if we had that on different parts of the continent, in countries, what do you think we would see about some of our own leaders on the continent and their cognitive abilities at that age? Because of course the process in and of itself is what is revealing. Because often these leaders are protected. They're shielded from that public scrutiny where you only see a leader or you hear them speak once a year. Otherwise, you just have pictures sent out every once in a while.
I think really it would be interesting for us, but in order for the rest of Africa to achieve that, we need media freedoms. I believe that in most of our African countries, we don't have media freedoms. In fact, even in America, because remember, for the longest of time, they were covering up for Joe Biden. For the longest of time, and once again, Cathy, the conspiracy theorists were proven right. They talked about his mental abilities, and they're the ones who said that he's going to be forced out. Everybody said it's just conspiracy theories. It has happened. But press freedoms are needed in Africa for us to get to that level. And I think it would go so much better for us.
Yeah, Atuka, I agree with you on that one. Atuka out in Matlosana. Also, of course, quite glaring is the absence. One would have thought that by now there would be so much written actually addressing this issue, but it does feel like the elephant in the room somewhat, even when it comes to international media, right? I wonder why. Tsepo, you're out in Mpumalanga. Good morning.
Good morning, Osketi.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm well, Tsepo. You're back, so you can go for it.
Yeah. So, Oscar, I wanted to talk about VBS, but I thought of something. This morning I had a serious conversation with my employees about that two-pot withdrawal. Oscar, I think this is the stupidest bill a president can ever sign. I urge all people, all employers, Oscar, to like sit down with their employees and explain explain properly how these thing will work. Yeah? Because of you can withdraw your pension fund. You can't tap into that. You can't withdraw your pension fund because it's gonna mess up everything. Okay.
Well, now the point is that now people can, but whether they should or not becomes the question, right?
They should not, Oskiti. If you have a problem, Oskiti, as an employee, I think you should sit down with your boss and explain your problem and see where he or she can help you. But don't withdraw. That even that kept amount, Oskiti, it's useless. It's ridiculous, Oskiti. How can you withdraw the limit of 30,000? That will be taxed, Oskiti.
Yeah. You know, Tsepo, I think that obviously, I don't know if you ever listen to the finance segment that we do on a Tuesday with Brian Hirsch, but one of the things that's become clear, you know, after really taking a look at all the very different angles, is that this move was targeted at your sort of the very low income earners, because that's who it makes the biggest difference for. So if you're sort of sitting at, you know, where that from a taxation point of view, you're looking at between 0 and 18%. But if your tax threshold is above that, then, you know, absolutely don't tap into the system, because it just does not make any sense. But again, we have to understand where the working class is, and also why it is that unions actually pushed for this bill. Because remember, it was the unions that tabled this matter within the ANC. They're the ones that pushed for it until the point to where it is today, where it's now been signed into law.
If you have 200,000 now, 10% of 200,000 is 20,000. If you're gonna withdraw that 20,000, it will be taxed. It's so useless for you to withdraw that 20,000. Some people think they will get that. If I withdraw 20,000, I will get 20,000. It's even less than 13,000 around there that you will get out of 20,000. So it's useless for you to withdraw that money from, and it's gonna hurt you. It's gonna hurt you in the long run.
Okay, Tsepo.
It's really gonna hurt you in the long run.
Let's leave it there. Tsepo out in Mpumalanga, and you can expect us to do more on it, on the financial slot with Brian, especially now that it's coming into effect in about a month's time. But do your homework carefully. Don't just jump into the withdrawals, because as Tsepo is saying, you know, if you're paying tax, annual tax, anything above 18%, it's really not. It's not going to be worth it. Deborah, you're out in Bloem. Good morning.
Good morning, Oscar.
Rona le kae?
I'm not Oscar. Oscar, I think I'm just going to maybe refer you back to our conversation last year, and that's basically the complaint that I'm going to come up with. I'm talking about the Human Rights Commission.
Okay. Please remind me, Deborah, what was the issue that you raised?
The issue I had, Oscar, was that I had a case with a woman that called me with a K word. And there was a ruling. The court ruled, and she was found guilty on that. And then I was represented by the Human Rights Commission. That was way back when Guan Jones was still here in Bloemfontein. And I worked with him on that case. So we won the case. And then I think that was just before you went to your league last year when I spoke to you about it. And that was in 2015 when that happened. And then when the judgment was handed down, But up until today, as the judgment went, the woman was supposed to have been taken to a sensitization program, and she was supposed to pay a fine. But as you can see, I've been sent from pillar to post by the Human Rights Commission because nothing has ever been done to that lady. As I asked, when will the lady be sent to a sensitization program? Because I personally do believe that if anything, if these people who are of this caliber are not being dealt with, then what message does it convey out there? That I can just go to court and then be found guilty, and then what then? Nothing has been done about it because there's no follow-up, there's no anything of the sort that has to be done.
Look,
I even went as far as calling their head office.
Mm.
And the response I got from the gentleman, that I've forgotten his name, was through an email. That guy just said he will get back to me. It's more than a year later, he's still getting back to me.
Yeah. And you know,
they did tell me that they changed management and then they were not aware of my case and all of those things.
And has it been run from the provincial office or from the Human
Rights Commission and how they deal with things? Because in my perception, it looks like they only run and get things done when the thing or the cases are in public domains, or if they are given attention by the media, then they will pretend like they do care for people. That's how I feel.
So Teboho,
even here in the local office, I'm
not sure if Teboho can actually hear me. Teboho, can you hear me?
Of a different kind. You see people who are not really willing to help you in any country. So I don't know. I'm bringing this up on air and on national radio because I'm hoping to maybe get help.
All right. It looks like we're having an issue with Teboho's connectivity there in terms of his case that was not resolved with the HRC. I was hoping that we'd be able to just get a couple of answers out of him, but we will follow up with Teboho and also the HRC to find out why they're not giving him any feedback on that matter. James, you're out in the Johannesburg CBD. Good morning.
How are you, Cathy?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree that there are extreme cases of old people who tend to cling into power for a longest of time, like your peer, as you rightfully pointed out, Biden, Donald Trump, and many other people. But, I also have a problem with the youth, just being desperate, trying to push people into retirement very quickly. Because for me, I don't think that politics is a career for both the youth and the old people. I don't think that anybody who goes to school, necessarily think that one day you're going to be a politician. So when you go to school, you're going there to learn a certain craft, And then, because I still feel that the reason why, especially in Africa, we're having so much unemployment is because the only way that a person can survive is to go into politics, And even those who got degrees, for instance, Kate, are you there?
Yes, I am, James. I'm listening to you.
For instance, I think that, if a young person at the age of 30, 35, who has a PhD, and then he just goes straight to politics, for me, I think that those are the things that create unemployment. Because, he has never put the degree into use, because if you are qualified into something, maybe an engineer or something, you can create jobs, Politics should be a last resort. So in Africa, people tend to take politics as some form of employment because of the condition that you are in. And also because of maybe the old people themselves, they're creating the situation because, it is a fact that in Africa, people are sitting pretty, comfortably, are people who are in parliament, people who are somehow linked to politics. And those people, young people, or people in general, who are having businesses, like we have a business with the government, you'll be paid after 3 to 4 months, and your business will go down the ground. So I just think that a graduate, young person, who just graduated and goes straight into politics, they're exacerbating unemployment. I mean, we need innovation and creativity and all sorts of things, that will expand, the employment pool,
And,
because
and
if
James,
you look at,
I guess that's why they're also called career politicians, right? Because when it comes to some of these individuals, the reality is that they wouldn't be able to get jobs anywhere else other than in politics.
No, I agree, and that's sad. That's so sad, because it shouldn't be the case. The case should be, I'm studying, I'm doing engineering, I need to go there and get some experience and create some good things, Who knows? I mean, maybe you would have another African or South African Steve Jobs. But if people just go to university with an extra money and then they go straight into politics, for me, it's just, I don't know, it's just it's a waste of time, waste of money.
Okay.
Because you don't need qualification to go into politics, So young people should go into innovation, science, technology, and other things, and so that we can be able. Because politics was the last resort. For instance, lastly, if a young lawyer, if you are a lawyer, when you study law, you are not you don't even think that you'll be a judge, because there's no curriculum, that prepares you to be a judge. It comes with experience.
All right, James, we're going to have
you.
to leave it there. James out in the Johannesburg CBD. I'm back with your calls after this break.
Yeah, we can do this. It's been a long time coming. This deserves to grow. It's a great business. If they don't like it, someone else will. And fund me so I can expand. Maybe I can offer them shares. I need to retain equity for staff. It's going to be good for recruitment. Yeah.
Possible begins with that one great idea. When Telkom enables entrepreneurs to make their ingenuity a reality, we grow local economies. Telkom. Possible begins here.
What is Ushuni, you say? Ushuni has a musical gift and can transform a song. Ushuni can fuse folk music with a popular urban beat or tune. Ushuni can take us on a beautiful musical journey. Ushuni way to Gelo. Join us in unearthing South Africa's next folk music star. 40 talented contestants from around South Africa competing for the ultimate grand prize of 500,000 Rand cash and a recording deal. Angeke basikhone with Ushuni Womhlaba, starting 7 July, Sundays at 6 p.m. only on SABC 1.
Tweet at SAFM Radio and at Cathy Mohlahlana.
All right, we continue the conversation on the talking point. I'm still taking your calls on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial on the WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104 107. Anonymous, you're in Durban. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Well, thank you, Anonymous.
Well, thanks. First, I'd like to compliment you. I don't think there's a talk show host that is as competent as you are. I listened to your thing with the e-hailing people on Friday. You handled it with such aplomb. There is no one on the radio business that is as good as you are.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Anonymous. I appreciate that feedback. What do you want to talk about this morning?
I was just going to say that regarding the story in the Middle East, Israel has a right to defend itself, and people just need to take off the blinkers, and there's two sides to every single story. And if Mike, who was your first caller, would concentrate on the atrocities that are happening in Africa and give his attention to that, you might see that we are far worse off as Africans, what's happening on our own continent as to what's happening in the Middle East.
And Anonymous, to the extent that this court finding by the ICJ basically says that, Israel, the argument of self-defense by Israel cannot hold because it is an occupier in that region, and that the legitimacy of that argument then is eroded. What do you say to that?
Well, as I said, there's two sides to every story. In 1967, they were attacked. In 1973, they were attacked. I'm talking about the Israelis, and they had a right to defend themselves. And if they took over parts of the land that from where they were attacked, so be it. In, I think, the early 2000s, they moved out of certain areas, gave up whatever they had taken over, and gave it back to the Palestinians. The fact that they can't control themselves with Palestinians, the fact that the Hamas use innocent people to defend themselves, there's a point of no return. And what happened in October was atrocious. That innocent people, children, going to a concert were attacked innocently. They weren't harming anybody. They were just there to have a good time there. Children were burnt in ovens.
Yeah, but Anonymous, when we look at this ruling, right, it deals with the heart of the argument that has been sustained by Israel for a long time, because it explicitly says that Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories is illegal in its current state, and that before much else should happen is that Israel should return those territories to Palestine.
Well, they did return in the early 2000s. I'm not too sure exactly how much they returned or what they returned. And they gave over to the Palestinians. The Palestinians got taken over by the Hamas terrorists. And so unless Hamas come to the party and say, okay, we're willing to sit and talk and find an amicable way around it, it's never going to end. Because as soon as a peace treaty is signed or some kind of truce is signed, give them a year or two and we're back to square one.
Yeah. All right. Anonymous, out in Durban, we're going to have to leave.
I just want to compliment you again. I think you've been doing the show for about 4 years now. There is not a radio personality in South Africa that can hold a candle to you. I'd show that dark.
All right, Anonymous, thank you again. I think that's very generous of you. Zuko, you're out in Mpumalanga. Good morning.
Good morning, Oscar Delgai.
Rona Legai.
What's
the problem, Zuko?
The problem is we filed the case to go bargaining council. Then the bargaining council it failed before company. So now bahua akwatile abua the way abuang katingore. But there is nothing that we can do, even if we can go to bargaining council. I kill the case about 16 cases before everybody winner. So easy. And the non-trade alarm. Runadi driver will becoming insurance company. Like now, diesel consumption, they said I must pay 23,333 rands. For Nike senior diesel, the one church go final go hearing. The hearing I think to reach true. Man ka 12. So in happy pattern tire. Una lintate mo market tate maluka na thotsi panchar mole a etsa call out to batla fix the tire. So I am more along the N2 between Mandini na go sapi Mandini mole ba le ba mothunya on Friday. I am mo ditare tsa teng tsa company ke di recap tsa gale auskate tsa gale ntwe ntse recap go di mo fela wa bona. And no di driver tse ngata tse ke sebetsa le tsona se ba iketsa tsa molao ya bona mo tseleng. They are breaking the law ya South Africa ya go gana.
Okay, so Zuko, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put you back through to level. So Zuko is a truck driver, and he's complaining about the bargaining council, the industry bargaining council, and he says that there are a lot of challenges that truck drivers are currently facing, and these are not adequately addressed by the council, and he's one of those that's undergoing a disciplinary hearing for basically resisting some of the steps that have been taken against him, including him being charged with wasting diesel, which he says, is a charge that he believes it's a cost the company should have picked up, and also giving examples of where drivers have, been victims of violence, but they're expected to cover the cost of whatever has been lost in those incidents. Janusz, I'm going to bet on you and take you, even though we're just a nudge away from news. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Thank you. Cathy, I would like to talk about that. Is it possible to have another adjustment of VAT? We've got a 15% of VAT, and then some of the products are protecting the poor community. But if you will go and you and look into the VAT in other countries, like for instance in many European countries, you've got 4 brackets or 3 brackets, not the one bracket of the charging of the VAT. That's what does it say? That for instance, like in Hungary, for instance, VAT is 27%. All the Scandinavian country, the highest is 25, and then some is 21, 23, whatever, and then let's say 17, 14, and 5, 7. What we'll do, for instance, my point is that we rich people, they are paying 15% of VAT, when the middle class, and you just pick up your head financially, you're earning 15,000, let's say 20,000, something like this, and you're paying the same VAT as these rich millionaires, which is not fair.
Okay, Janusz in Cape Town, let's leave it there. It's 10 o'clock.
In our top stories, 2 billion rand drug bust suspects appearing in court, and world leaders react to Biden dropping out of the election race. Good morning. 4 suspects arrested following the discovery of drugs worth over 2 billion rand at a farm in Groblersdal in Limpopo are appearing before the local magistrates court. The Hawks have described the drug bust as the largest drug manufacturing lab in the country. The suspects, including 2 Mexican nationals, were arrested on Saturday. Avafani Munyai reports.
The drug manufacturing laboratory was established in the middle of a dense bush at the foot of a mountain several kilometers outside Groblersdal. Highly sophisticated drug-producing machinery and equipment were discovered in the laboratory. The laboratory is a center of clandestine manufacturing of crystal meth worth over 2 billion rand. The head of the Hawks, Lieutenant General Godfrey Libya, has said that preliminary investigations indicate that the drugs were being trafficked and supplied to countries abroad.
The Judicial Conduct Tribunal is today expected to reconvene for hearings in a probe against suspended judge of the Gauteng High Court, Nana Makubele. The probe follows allegations of gross misconduct on the part of the judge by civic organization #UniteBehind. It alleges she violated the separation of powers principle by being both a judge and chairperson of state-owned company Prasa. Zoleka Kodashe reports.
It followed her appointment as PRASA chairperson in 2017, a position she would allegedly continue occupying despite her appointment to the Gauteng bench by former President Jacob Zuma in November of the same year. Makubele was allegedly intended to begin with her judicial duties in January of the following year. During the previous sittings, it was also heard how Makubele had vested interests in corruption-accused company Siyaya and took several steps to advance the interests of the company, which was allegedly involved in state capture and received contracts from PRASA through corrupt and fraudulent means.
President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to reply to the debate on his recent opening of Parliament address shortly. It was a joint sitting of Parliament which brought together delegates of the NCOP and members of the National Assembly. Ramaphosa's speech under the Government of National Unity was welcomed and criticized during the joint debate on Friday. Mercedes Besent reports.
One of the responses the President is expected to give relates to the signing of the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill into law. The call to sign the Bella Bill was made by Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi, who is a special delegate in the NCOP. Lesufi's call came as the new Basic Education Minister in the GNU, Siviwe Kwagube, reportedly wants the Bella Bill to be sent back to Parliament. Meanwhile, after responding to the joint OPA debate this morning, President Ramaphosa is expected back again in the National Assembly tomorrow morning to deliver the presidency's budget vote. He is then expected to reply to the budget vote debate on Wednesday.
Financial expert Prem Govender has advised South Africans against the premature withdrawal of their retirement funds. She was reacting to the Pension Fund Amendment Bill that was signed into law by President Cyril Ramaphosa. The law now implements the two-part retirement system, which means 1/3 of retirement contributions will be split into a savings component and 2/3 into a retirement component. This will enable members of retirement funds to access their savings without having to resign. Workers in good standing can withdraw up to 30,000 rand of their pension fund savings, with the minimum being 2,000 rand. Govender says while this could help as an immediate financial buffer, it will have a negative impact on one's overall retirement payout.
I know that people are eagerly awaiting this, and yes, while it will make a difference to their lives, my fear is that people who don't need it are going to withdraw that 30,000. I think the best advice we can give your listeners is please do not be tempted to draw out those funds if you don't need it.
Further afield, and finally, leaders and senior politicians around the world have paid tribute to US President Joe Biden following his decision to withdraw from the presidential race. The Israeli president called Biden a true ally of the Jewish people, while the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese praised Biden's decision.
President Biden deserves today, I think, to be recognised for once again not putting himself first, but giving his first consideration to being what he believes is in the interests of the United States of America, as he has done his whole public life, and I pay tribute to him today.
Recapping the top story, 4 suspects arrested following the discovery of drugs worth over 2 billion rand at a farm in Groblersdal in Limpopo are appearing before the local magistrates court. For SAFM News, I'm Anne Musa.
Hey, want to check your TV license balance conveniently? Look no further. Our SMS service allows you to do just that. By sending a message containing your ID or TV license number to 44210, you can quickly access your balance without needing multiple inquiries or waiting on hold. Plus, standard SMS rates apply. Take advantage of this efficient method to stay informed and streamline your payment process today. T's and C's apply.
A century is full of thrilling moments. You can break it down to 10 decades. It is a journey of all kinds of challenges, but winners don't focus on the storm. They look forward to a rainbow. By contrast, South Africa tied its best ever gold medal performance in 100 years. From 1912 in Stockholm to London in 2012. Once again, it was in the pool that Team SA did most of their triumphing, with Cameron van der Berg setting a world record in winning the men's 100-meter breaststroke. And who will ever forget Chad de Clos toppling Michael Phelps in the men's 200-meter butterfly.
It's going to be close. Does he touch? He doesn't. Le Clos touched because Phelps got it wrong on the line. It's unbelievable.
Magical moments of the Olympics. Brought to you by SABC Sport, proud broadcaster of the Olympic Games Paris 2024.
For the love of the game.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
Welcome to the second hour of the show, 8 after 10 o'clock. Coming up in this hour, we're continuing with our agriculture series, which we will be wrapping up next week, by the way. And we will have then the officials from a government point of view who are going to respond, I think, to, number one, the challenges that we've heard from different parts of the industry. We've spoken to farmers, we've spoken to industry bodies and associations that represent farmers, and today we are focusing then on communal land, because it is also an issue that has come up quite predominantly in the series. So we'll be joined by the National House of Traditional and Khoisan leaders, and also a journalist who has been working in this field quite extensively, Peter Mashala. He'll be weighing in on the issues that communities face. Before we get into it, your voice notes from the open line.
Good morning. I hope you guys are well. You're doing well, and good morning to your listeners.
Just a friendly message. I'm just thankful with everything. It's eye-opening experience nowadays in South Africa. So much thankful for this station, SAFM, and also TikTok. It's a couple of years ago, I didn't know anything, but now I've researched, I've searched, I've go to the history books, go to the Google search machine, and I compile those. But we are wide awake, and I hope our youth, as the future of tomorrow, will be using the tools to do their research and stuff, and stop let these propagandas and fake news and stuff, fake histories enter their minds, but rather keep them wide awake.
Good morning, Cathy. So President Biden must now be responding to media speculation and public opinion about his health, because those medical experts, or whatever you call them, are not people who have examined him personally, right? So I think it's just been petty to say he hasn't given reasons. If he had given reasons, I suppose they would still be interrogated and, questioned. I don't think he wins whichever way. If he hadn't stood down, still that was an issue. I just don't get the unnecessary interrogation and questioning. It's just petty to me, really. Debbie, thanks.
Good morning, Cathy. We can't have double standards and expect Israel to implement the ICJ's rulings when, on the other hand, Russia has for years blatantly ignored the rulings of the ICJ. So, we need the countries of the world to enforce the ICJ's rulings, both on Russia and Israel. Thanks, Farai.
Good morning, Cathy. Hope you're well. This two-pot system and the people that can take money out, while it will commence in September, the people can only take the money out that they've paid in for the next year. So they'll have access to that money. So no one will have any access to any money now. It will only be in September next year, once they've paid 12 months pension subscriptions and everything like that. They'll have access to that money, not now. Mark from Cape Town.
All right. So, like I said, we will certainly be looking closer at the two-part system and its implementation as, of course, we anticipate it come into effect in September. You can expect more from Brian on that too. Well, today, we continue our series of discussions unpacking the state of the agricultural sector with a focus on the 2 million small-scale farmers that are currently operating in the country. We're going to be addressing some of the issues raised around access to communal and rural land, and also just what are some of the solutions that can be shared in building a more expansive, small-scale farming landscape. What we have learned over the last 2 weeks is that the only way that farming can be sustainable is if it is moved out of being small-scale. Because as long as it is small-scale, it means it's not as profitable as it could be, but also not as sustainable as it should be. Jose Thabo Siatlolo is the chairperson of the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders, joins me this morning. Jose Siatlolo, good morning to you. Thank you for your time. I'm well, thank you. I'm going to ask you just to try and speak a bit louder. I'm not hearing you very clearly on that connection. Also joining this conversation, Peter Mohlahlana, editor of Media 24's African Farming Magazine. Mr. Mohlahlana, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to your listeners.
All right. So Peter, perhaps let me begin with you. Drawing on what has been said by farmers who were the first to be part of the series, who raised concerns about access to land, and it was the biggest issue that was on the table for them, and that was a serious impediment to their sustainability. And they brought us to the issue of communal land and said it would be so much easier if rural land was made accessible for those in the industry, but often they seem to face quite a lot of headwinds when it comes to your local chiefs, indunas, whatever you may call it, the traditional houses that are often in charge of taking care of and disposing this land. Your general experience with communal land and farming on communal land, and why it is so often that these ventures fail.
Well, Cathy, thank you. I think my experience, especially with access to communal land, I mean, will just directly be headed to the lack of any kind of law, that governs the communal land areas. Because if we go back, I mean, I grew up in an area called Jericho, and Jericho is in the Brits area in the northwest, where many years ago, under the Bophuthatswana government, there were clear laws that governed the land use in the communal area. So currently, I mean, like since the fall of the Bophuthatswana government, that has changed significantly to a point where now you don't know what is happening with those areas. So this also combines with, I mean, I would say in the olden days, we had those tribal authorities that really were helping in governing and in terms of who access the land and how they access the land. But since then, this whole thing of tribal authorities is fizzling out, and we've got a lot of people now just doing whatever they want in these communal areas. So I think it's true with the farmers saying access to the communal land is quite cumbersome. Is riddled by a lot of corruption with the indunas and the people who are supposed to be at least helping in controlling and managing the communal lands. But again, it's also an issue of lack of development in those areas. I mean, infrastructural development. These areas are just barren lands which have no infrastructure at all, and the roads are quite bad. Like which those are very important things in terms of developing agricultural land.
Peter, one would think that this would be the low-hanging fruit, right? Because, as you're saying, the land is available. You have communities that are very desperate for development, but also desperate to try and be able to create some form of livelihood for themselves, for their families. So why is it that it is not being exploited to its fullest potential?
Look, I think the issue is, I mean, I wouldn't say, I mean, like blanketly that everything is not working. I mean, like we have areas where this land is used quite properly. I mean, I in the years where I've worked in agricultural media, and I've worked since around 2008, from 2006. I mean, I've visited a lot of farmers who have done very well on communal land. Like one farmer that comes to mind was Mr. Nesani. Mr. Nesani in Limpopo in the Nonedi area, where he was farming. He was actually the largest tomato farmer in the country, utilizing the communal lands. So I wouldn't say it's not really working, but I think there are quite big issues which are relating to this, and these are issues relating to infrastructure, as I say, the roads, and also control or the management of the land. I'll give an example of again where I come from in Jericho. That area was in those days was highly productive, and that's not only that area in the northwest, but many other areas in the northwest. It was highly productive during those time of President Mangope. And because there was sort of an intent coming from the government at the time of boosting agriculture. So he made sure there was infrastructure. We had a cooperative in Jericho which supplied inputs and all those things, which was almost a parastatal. But currently we don't have those things. So and agriculture as is just quite a difficult business to manage when the support like that is not in place. So currently, as I said, with the lands in Jericho, you have no support from the government. You have no. Right now you can't even go get a loan saying that you are working on a communal land, because banks have a system where they use land as collateral for instance. So it's quite, there are so many challenges in that setup, unlike when I have private land where I can just go to the bank and I can access the money.
Jose Siatlolo, let me bring you into this conversation. Again, I will reference the young farmers, entrepreneurs that we had in studio 3 weeks ago as we kickstarted this series. And, they highlighted how tribal authorities often become a big hindrance when it comes to accessing land. Your view as the National House of Traditional and Khoisan leaders?
Yeah, no, thank you, Cathy. Just maybe to give it a bit of context, how land was allocated perhaps 150, 200 years ago, it was much more comprehensive than it is currently. How our grand and great-grandfathers used to allocate land was not how we do it today. How we do it today is that we just give you land for you as an individual or as a couple. But how they used to do it, agriculture was at the center of how they allocated land. Firstly, when they gave you land, they also gave you land, including the land that would belong to your children, where they would be able to also build, but also to plant vegetables in the yard and fruits. As you would realize, in many villages, you'd find that in a homestead, you would find a lot of trees for fruits and so forth. Secondary to what they did, they allocated land just outside the village, where community members would be having pieces of land where they would be planting crop. Different types of crops. Now, as the successive governments came in, one of the things they introduced in the communal areas was to make sure that within a village, you would have a plot maybe between 5 and 2 hectares, where different community members would go there and plant vegetables to sell in the community or to the neighboring communities. So as it stands, we traditional leaders currently, we have inherited that system whereby there is agricultural land just outside the village where people mainly plant crop there or used to plant crop. And then inside villages, you would have those plots between 2 and 5 hectares, where if there is a cooperative, because mainly it's cooperatives that are utilizing this land. You would be having cooperatives that are being given the land by traditional leaders to produce, obviously, at a small scale, because there is no sufficient capital given to them by government. to scale up the business itself. But I think in terms of accessing agricultural land, I think, traditional communities, it's one of the most easily accessible land because you do not necessarily have to pay a lot of money or even to pay in some instances because the land is not for sale. It's just a question of allocation and making sure that the land is utilized for what you had initially intended to do, because some people would say, no, I want to plant vegetables there, but when you get there, it's something else. So we give people agricultural land a lot of times, but a lot of times again they fail because of, not because they are incapable of farming, but because of the support. The apartheid government and specifically the Bantustan government that we had, because I'm also from the former Botswana, there was a lot of support that was given. You'd find that a lot of those plots were given fences, water was available, the boreholes were drilled. So a bit of infrastructure is still there. It needs to be maintained and upgraded. But our cooperatives are suffering and they are failing because of lack of infrastructure.
Sure.
Yes.
Hosi Siatlolo, what you've said around the cooperatives and how those are under-supported, and that often, of course, leads to the failure of the operations is absolutely true. Which is why you then also have individuals that think, well, maybe if I do this by myself, and I don't necessarily always have to be working from a point of consensus, I can go a bit further. And yet, these individuals, you say that traditional leaders will, even in some instances, just hand out land, not ask for money and give people the opportunity to farm. But that seems to contradict what is actually happening. Because rural land, which is supposed to be the most accessible, including from a financial point of view, is now not necessarily the most accessible, because there are monies that traditional authorities are demanding of individuals. And again, it's a point that our entrepreneurs made, that they're being asked for so much money from the tribal authorities that it's better for them to stick with the leases that they've taken out than to go and try and occupy a different space. Because, of course, that space still needs to be developed too.
No, I would disagree with that. It's mainly when a traditional council charges money, it's mainly for administrative purposes. You do not necessarily lease out the land because, in any case, remember, all these families, they've got farming lands themselves, which were given by our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. So you do not necessarily have to even make an application. It's land that belongs to you. It's a question of you going to the traditional council and informing the traditional council that in Nasiatolo, I want to farm in my grandfather's land, and then you are given that go ahead, but also to inform the community members who might be grazing in that land, inform that you will be utilizing the land. It should not be suppressed. Except, of course, where it's somebody who's coming from the outside the village where they would want to lease out the land. Perhaps they could be talking about that. But also, Cathy, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a drive from government to say, as traditional leaders, pledge 1 million hectares collectively so that we can utilize that land and put it into production. We have records of that 1 million hectares in different parts of the country. Because traditional leaders, they are farmers themselves, so they understand the importance of farming. Majority, if not all of us, are farmers. We pledged the 1 million hectares through facilitation by the National House. The records are there, but government, even up to today, has not utilized that 1 million hectares, not even a quarter of it or a fraction of it. So to say that the land is not accessible, I would disagree with that, because even ourselves, we want it to be productive. We have seen how that land has been able to assist our different families to make means to take their children to school, to build houses, to build families. So how can we again ourselves just stop people from farming? We are farmers ourselves. So I would disagree that traditional councils are saying,
look,
they are refusing land. No, traditional councils that said no, then I would entertain it.
No, Hosi Seatlo, on this one, I think that then we're going to have to disagree with each other, because if that is not the experience that is being relayed by those who are in industry, and remember, they're sharing this experience because for them, it is an impediment to being able to grow and scale up. And
specify what was the problem exactly?
All right. Just hang on for me. I've got to take the latest news headlines. It is 10:30. We'll continue this conversation in a moment.
Thank you very much, Cathy, and a very good morning. With the news headlines, ke Modupi Makgalemele. 2 people have died in a house fire in Strandfontein Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town this morning. 4 suspects arrested following the discovery of drugs worth over 2 billion rand at a farm in Groblersdal, Limpopo, are appearing before the local magistrates court, and the 25th International AIDS Conference gets underway in Munich, Germany today. A full news update coming up at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 26 to the dollar, 23 rand 59 to the pound, and 19 rand 87 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mostly in the red at the closing bell. The JSE mainly weaker in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe have extended gains. Gold is trading at $2,402, platinum $963 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $82.88 a barrel.
Nick is hiding a dark secret. For 20 years, everything has been going according to plan. Until now. He has the perfect wife, Maya, a smart, ambitious defense lawyer who is on the verge of Nick's dark secret and how she was one of Nick's targets 20 years ago. The veil of secrecy will fall. Nothing stays hidden forever. Betrayal, secrets, suspense. Oh, the drama. This is Undercover, Mondays to Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on S3. Channel your best drama with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
From 1952 in Helsinki to 1996 in Atlanta, Penny Haynes makes history 44 years later. The sensational swimmer ended the long wait with victory in the women's 100-meter breaststroke.
Haynes tried to hold Beard off again. She did it in the 100. Can she do it in the 200?
Champions always want more, especially at the Olympic Games. Haynes was not content with just one gold. She scooped the second in the women's 200-meter breaststroke in a brand new Olympic record.
Haynes will win gold for the second time, an Olympic record time.
Magical moments of the Olympic Games. Brought to you by SABC Sport, proud broadcaster of the Olympic Games Paris 2024.
For the love of the game.
July is Film Month. KwaZulu-Natal Tourism and Film Authority welcomes filmmakers from all over the world who are attending the exciting festivities lined up. The Durban International Film Festival, Durban Film Mart and Isipeto program, the Simon Sabela KZN Film and Television Awards on the 20th of July. We look forward to hosting you in our beautiful province and doing tourism and film business. Join the conversation using hashtag SSA24, hashtag Beyond Imagination, hashtag KZN has it all.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 104.4 FM in Durban.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. We're still focusing on our agriculture series, looking particularly at the challenges when it comes to rural land and communal farming for this week. Kgosi Thabo Seatlholo is the chairperson of the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders, and Peter Mashala is editor of Media 24's African Farming magazine. So as I was saying to you, Kgosi Seatlholo, the experience that is shared by some small-scale farmers who have tried to access land, and I'm talking now those that have shared their experiences with us, say that they have found it very difficult to access land in rural areas because of the financial demands that tribal authorities are making in exchange for them being able to occupy and use that land for commercial purposes.
Cathy, you can't make me chase a ghost because I will never be able to catch it. You know, as the National House, we are there to represent traditional leaders in their communities. Just as you usually do in your show, whereby there's a problem in a certain department, like I think you did a few weeks ago when I was listening, I think it had to do with NEFSAS. If there's a specific issue that is troubling somebody in a traditional community, you need to speak to us so that we can intervene. But it would be problematic to take comments of few people to make it as if in traditional communities it's very difficult to access land for farming purposes, and traditional leaders are corrupt, they are asking for excessive money and all of that. So as far as I know, one of the easiest ways of accessing agricultural land is to go to a traditional council. They will definitely give you the land. Hence, we even pledged 1 million hectares to government to say, put it to production. We are not giving 1 million hectares for traditional leaders. It was for traditional communities. So how can we give 1 million hectares to government and then come again and refuse to give a community member 100 hectares, for an example? Logically, why would we do that?
Peter, let me bring you in here because, of course, you deal with matters of rural land and you've had to also cover some of the experiences that whether small-scale farmers or even those that are farming on communal properties, the challenges that they have faced. I mean, is it fair to say that the complaints that have been raised are just few and far in between, and that on any given day you can go to a traditional authority and ask for land, and you should be able to walk out of there with very little problems?
Well, Cathy, I think it would differ. I think maybe from area to area. And with my personal experience, I mean, as much as I'm also covering these stories, but I also farm on communal land, you know, and sometimes when I listen to these complaints, sometimes I wonder where they happen. In my own experience, I mean, I would believe that the communal land is the most easily accessible land that one can use. It's only now the challenges that I've mentioned before that comes with that. With in many areas, the area that I'm in, I think we're paying something like 100 rand a hectare per year, or something less than that. Because I don't even remember that, but it's so cheap. And I've done so many other stories, covered and visited a lot of farmers who are utilizing this land, and who tells me as well that, I mean, I was with a young man not long ago, about 3 weeks ago. He's one of the upcoming chicken farmers. I think his name is not coming to my mind now. I mean, he tells me that he went to a traditional leader where he got the piece of land for 600 rand. and that is where he is currently farming. So I've heard of such complaints, but really I haven't had an experience where I would say, I mean, like the traditional leaders are asking exorbitant type of money. Those issues may exist in certain area, but I wouldn't say it's an overall. It's like the majority of these lands occupy like that, operates like that. So, I mean, like, yes, there's an issue also of just control and management in between. After accessing that land, there are other challenges that comes in terms of how that land is managed, because we have issues like, I mean, like in a village, like where I am, you have got guys who have cattle and guys who are trying to do crop. And then you've got issues of cattle eating or goats eating other people's crops and all those issues. But I think the biggest problem is not really access to land, but the support that comes through, because it's not really easy to utilize the communal land because of the issues that I've raised. I mean, like, but the banks are not really keen, and many other financial institutions are not really keen on communal land, because you can't use that land as security. Because once you've taken the money from the bank, if you can't repay, they're gonna need to get that money back somehow. Most in private land ownership, then they would auction away your land. So it comes with that, and then it's also an issue of infrastructure, like electricity on the farms, and fences, roads, all those kind of challenges. And Cathy, I must say as well,
yeah.
Farming is not easy. It's quite an expensive exercise to farm, develop land, and all that. If we don't have that support in place, then we bound to have problems. Because I've seen a lot of young people who are coming in very excited about farming and stuff like that, and you hit those brick walls, and maybe some of them then they lump these issues together. But in my own experience, accessing that land is easier than actually utilizing it, looking at those other issues that I've raised.
If we're to look at low-hanging fruit, particularly when it comes to communal farming, how can we make these cooperatives a lot more successful than perhaps what we are seeing currently? At least to get to the point of profitability, and where then these cooperatives can be said to be commercially viable. Because by and large, what we have existing today is you have cooperatives that are formed, but they're largely living from hand to mouth, and they're depending on sponsorships, on partnerships with people to come on board to assist them. Peter?
Cathy, I think the for me the biggest problem with corporates started at conceptualizing our model of cooperatives, especially when you talk now of the rural cooperatives and agriculture stuff. I think the model from the beginning was wrong. We didn't really get the right concept of cooperatives. I'll just go a little bit back on what cooperatives in the olden days and what they've become today. I mean, if we look at businesses like Afgri, for instance, Senves, and all these other agribusinesses that we call them agribusinesses, but they started off as cooperatives. So what happened in the past was that farmers, individual farmers were working on their own private lands, and individual farmers, family farms, or whatever. So they were working their farms alone. And then the challenges that we see today, I mean, those challenges existed: high input costs and high up and low prices and marketing costs and all those things. And then farmers came together and farmers then started to come together and say, let's club together and share some of these costs. I mean, like, if you're gonna buy some, I mean, like looking at the small farmers now. If you're going to buy fertilizer today, if I'm going to walk into a local co-op and buy a bag of fertilizer, it's hell of an expensive exercise. If I'm farming a piece of land and I need, let's say, if I'm going to say 10 bags of fertilizer, it's quite expensive. Unlike when a big commercial farmer goes to, they don't even buy it, because sometimes they buy it directly from the manufacturer, where he buys thousands of bags of fertilizer. I mean, like that, he can easily negotiate the price and discounts and stuff, like, unlike when I walk there and buy 10 bags of. So the whole concept from the beginning of our local co-ops, because I think government just came and lumped together everybody and said, now you are a cooperative, you're gonna work here, and then we have like an incentive of 500,000. And Cathy, if I'm sitting in the rural area there and I'm not working, and you come to me and say, no, we have a project of a cooperative, we want to form a cooperative of making candles, and I'm unemployed, I don't have money, and I have no interest at all of making candles, but you say, no, there's money here, there's going to be a stipend, there's 500,000, come, I'm gonna go there. But as soon as that incentive, as soon as that money dries up, I'm out. I'm not gonna sit there and struggle making candles and not making money. So I think the concept or how the cooperative model in South Africa, in agriculture was done, was wrong. I mean, if you compare the cooperative model in other countries like Kenya, there's where cooperatives are flourishing, because the concept is like the concept that I just spoke about the big cooperatives now that have become what we call the agribusinesses, because it's farmers who are working their own lands, and they are clubbing together to sort out a problem like transport, like input costs, where they can negotiate prices. Because if now we are 20, we form a cooperative, but our sole purpose is that we're just going to buy fertilizer or inputs. So it means that if we are 20 and we all need about 10 bags, it's about 200 bags. So it's easy for us to negotiate and get that pricing, that price down,
all right,
so that we can become profitable.
All right. Peter, thank you so much for sharing some of that insight that you have into the industry with us. Cyril, you're calling us from Kokstad, and you're a farmer. I understand you farm livestock and apples.
No, not apples. Yeah. Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to the viewers and your guests.
Yes.
Yes, I've been listening to the conversation, and these are various conversations that you brought on, which we appreciate. But the cry, it's the same cry. Now, what I've noticed is that let's start with, when I had a topic, traditional and Khoisan leaders. Now, when my research, the traditional leaders, they mostly are talking about tribal areas and so on, even homelands and that type of thing. And the act was there available for them because the 2003 Framework Act. But the Act 3 of 2019, you will remember, that was challenged in the court. So that is now stalled. What's my point I'm making? The Khoisan is then marginalized. But the traditional leaders, they have their land, like the former homeland, where they can practice. What is coming out there is that they're crying for assistance because they want to farm, but then to farm and even to contribute towards food security and that type of thing, you need money. And then the banks marginalize them. That's what I'm getting. But that is them. Where I am in Kokstad, that is a town falling under a district with many farms under the Griquas that were granted to the Griquas. We have a problem and a challenge that we were title deeds because our area was under Adam Koch, under a more advanced system with title deeds. We have a farm. I just come from the weekend from our farm with fire. You will see, came over the news, and some of the farms were burned. And those are white farmers that were taken away from Griquas. Now, these few farms that were left, we're the only farm that is a commercial size. But because it's left in the world, it's not actually commercial. It becomes a small-scale farm. So we have challenges of winding the world up, and we have all those challenges. So what I say, a solution will be now with the national government of unity, we have the gentleman there under COXA, because this falls under the COXA ministry. So if we can get the minister on your radio, and I think that will be fruitful to see what we can suggest, or even inviting. I'm talking about traditional leaders, inviting them, and even us too. I'm not separating that we are separate. We want to be Griquas or First Indigenous people separately. Now we are governed by the Act. But now at the moment as I speak, we are marginalized because the Khoisan is not recognized. Now that caused a concern that the Constitution of South Africa is marginalizing the Khoisan. And there are other programs from the former Tokati Visa where there is a farm that you can rent for 30 years. And then we have what they got in, already to equalize the inequality. That is restoration, restitution, and land and tenure. But our claims, again, as I speak, we got claims over 300 farms, and not one was delivered. We're sitting with these few, 4 or 5 of them that we have, and we have those challenges. We can't even move, leave alone that some of the farms now belong to government, and government is renting it out. Who is getting first preference? Black in particular. I think we need this conversation so that we can have a conversation where the minister, now that he's new, that we bring this thing to his attention so we can have a way forward.
Cyril, I'm going to also ask Kgosi Seatlholo to see if he can respond perhaps to some of the issues that you have raised and how they're addressing these issues through the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders.
And if we could start with the Traditional and Khoisan Act, because we are not recognized, and they at least are recognized.
Okay.
But there are challenges.
Cyril, let's give him a chance. Let's give him a chance to respond. Kgosi Seatlholo.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kate. The issue of the Khoisan, it's a historical issue as we all know it. What we have done as the National House over the years is to push government to institute a commission that would recognize Khoisan leaders in the same effect as we are recognized. I think the commission is there. We have made a lot of awareness for all Khoisan leaders to make the application so that they can be vetted and be recognized. Secondary to that, we've been having discussions with the Khoisan leaders to say, because when land was taken, you were the first one to be affected, starting with Cape Town, because if you look at Western Cape and Cape Town broadly, it is land that used to belong to the Khoisan communities. Now the question is the question of practicability. Is it practical to get that land back? I think the answer would be no. But then alternatively, what would happen in that case? Government is sitting with a lot of state land. What we are saying to government is to say, in the millions of hectares that are sitting with you as government, in any case, it's not your land, it's the people's land. You need to look at giving a portion of it to the Khoisan communities as part of redress, because the preamble of the Constitution speaks about the injustices of the past and attempting to redress. So part of the redress would be taking away some of that land from the state and giving it to the Khoisan community so that they can start being reintegrated fully back to society. They can start having their own villages as we equally have. They can start farming. Well, we also have the land, but we are not farming because farming is very expensive and there is no support from government to assist us to farm. But at least they should have that land. So that is what we have been saying for the past couple of years to government, to say, give away some of that state land to Khoisan communities because they are scattered all over the country now because they were the first ones to be affected when the colonizers settled there in Cape Town.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that response.
Hello, Patty.
Yeah.
Yes. Cathy, I hear the gentleman very clearly. I've done my own research over years. This comes up where people just keep on saying it's historical. And I know where they're heading to. Because in the Constitution, you're marginalized. You can only claim land after 1913. Now, I am sitting with research for years. I'm talking about title deeds where we also qualify after the 1913 Act. So that is low-hanging fruit. We can get that back. In the meantime, these talks are carrying on, as the gentleman saying, we've been busy with these talks over and over. But they are already benefiting because they are legally already recognized. This is the land that's falling under the Act. I've lost a legitimate claim, which I've been crying. That's a topic for another day. But you got to bring it in because our land now is given to non-Greco people with the 30 years of leasing and all that. And even the lease are made up because previously people were getting land and they couldn't work it. So that is for them. Our land cannot be given to somebody else, and we can't wait for government to give our land. We know this is our land that's falling under the Act.
All right. Cyril, look, I think that all of those issues are very legitimate issues that you have raised, and really it is fair enough. Kgosi Seatlholo, how long is it going to take, you think, realistically, to have this matter resolved? And as Cyril is saying, for them to end up with the title deeds that they need?
The process is so simple because remember, it's not land that government will be buying. So there's no financial implication. It's a question of the new minister proclaiming. I think it takes about 60 days. It's a question of the new minister doing a proclamation or gazetting that I would be giving 1 million hectares from the state to the Khoisan communities as part of the...
Are you going to be supporting that?
We have already started saying it to government. But this morning we wrote 2 letters. The one letter was to the Minister of Agriculture for him to come and explain how he's going to assist traditional communities with regards to farming issues. The second letter was to the Minister of Land Reform for him to come and explain when are they transferring the 13% to traditional communities, including those of the Khoisan communities. So we are inviting them to the sitting of the House, which I think is broadcasted through parliamentary channels. So their responses would be live, and South Africans should be in a position to listen to their responses to say how are they going to assist those communities. So it's something we are actively pursuing as the House.
All right. Kgosi Seatlholo, thanks for that. Thomas, you're out in Newcastle. Good morning.
Morning, Sis Cathy. Sis Cathy, thanks for these programs. One of the biggest problems, though, is paperwork. On paper, the government program is working very well, and the guys come and explain it very well. When it needs to be administered and handled and handed down to us as communities, the problem starts where, for instance, the government appoints advisors, for instance, who would come. Now you have land. I'm one of those guys who's in that situation. You have land, you're supposed to work on it, and then the government says, here's a program, we will support these guys because they're starting off. By the time you have to harvest, the advisor is having more land or harvest than you, who is supposed to be harvesting. And so the next year, you're still trusting the government to support you again with seed, fertilizer, and all those things. These are lived experiences here where government officials end up taking these things for themselves, taking the land for themselves because they have proximity advantage.
Thomas, sure. Yeah, I don't think it can be any more clear than that in terms of the experiences that people are going through, and what do you do there?
You see, and the problem is you want to go, there is almost like a lager situation where you think now you've come to the last person who's going to help you, only to find that no, the lager just shifted and you are inside, but you are not inside the lager, if you know what I'm saying, because it's so flexible, the whole thing. And when they come to report, your ministers, your DGs, and whoever is in that position. They are reporting based on the documents that is being submitted by the people further down the chain who are supposed to administer, oversee, help, and that. And the reports are good and well, and there is proof that material has gone out, land has been given. But when you come to look at the people, no one is hearing the people. The land is not there, and it's functioning. It's business as usual. The guys retire, they are rich, they have land and all that. That's the unfortunate thing we see.
Thomas, thanks for that perspective. Peter, I'll give you the final word.
Well, Cathy, I think just maybe touching quickly on what Dr. Thomas has just said. We have those issues are spread in both the communal land system and the private land system. Not well. When I say private land system now, I'm talking about the farms the land reform farms that have been given to the farm, because the same complaint is registered in those farms. But I think what my final word with regards to this communal land issue is that we need a government to commit itself in terms of how then we develop those lands. And as much as we have funds and programs, all those things in the government-owned farms, the land reform farms that have been given, we get the LDS programs, the recap programs, which are given to those state farms that are leased out to private individuals. We need also a program or a plan in terms of how do we develop the communal lands, and this should not only be on the Department of Agriculture alone, but there are a number of departments which has to get involved in this manner. In terms of developing the roads, in terms of developing the electricity lines to supply power to these farms.
All right.
Most often, the challenge is that there is no infrastructure to get these farms going, to get this land productive.
We're going to have to leave it there for this morning. Peter Mohlahlana, editor of News 24's or Media 24's African Farming Magazine, and Kgosi Thabo Siatlolo, who's the chairperson of the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders.
The top stories this hour: 2 people killed in a Cape Town house fire, and a 2 billion rand drug suspects appear in court. A very good morning. 2 people have died in a house fire in Stransfontein Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town. Fire and Rescue Services spokesperson Jermaine Carlsa says a double-story house caught alight, and authorities were notified in the early hours of this morning. He says 2 other people sustained burn wounds.
2 adults, a man and woman, were treated for smoke inhalation. Unfortunately, a woman and a young girl sustained fatal burn wounds. A building inspector was requested as the former house sustained substantial structural damages. The cause of the fire is yet to be determined, and the scene was handed over to the South African Police Service.
4 suspects arrested following the discovery of drugs worth over 2 billion rand at a farm in Groblersdal, Limpopo, are appearing before the local magistrates' court. The suspects, including 2 Mexican nationals, were arrested on Saturday. Abafani Munyai reports.
The drug manufacturing laboratory was established in the middle of a dense bush at the foot of a mountain several kilometers outside Groblersdal. Highly sophisticated drug-producing machinery and equipment were discovered in the laboratory. The laboratory is a center of clandestine manufacturing of crystal meth worth over 2 billion rand. The head of the Hawks, Lieutenant General Godfrey Libya, has said that preliminary investigations indicate that the drugs were being trafficked and supplied to countries abroad.
The trial of the 3 men accused of the murder of the German tourist on the Numbi Road leading to the Kruger National Park is expected to start today in the Mpumalanga division of the High Court in Mbombela. Jörg Snar was shot and killed in 2022. Armed men attacked him and other tourists who were traveling in a minibus on the Numbi Road. 3 suspects were arrested in different areas. The accused are also linked to a spate of business robberies in the province's Gertsibande district. The 25th International AIDS Conference gets underway in Munich, Germany today. The conference will bring together government officials, civil society, scientists, and those affected by HIV and AIDS. The UN AIDS will release a comprehensive report on the impact of AIDS in different countries. Our news desk spoke to the UN AIDS Executive Director, Winnie Byanyima, on the report's contents.
If technology, the latest technologies for prevention and treatment are shared, then success can be achieved. We can end AIDS as a public health threat by 2023. But right now, we are not on track. We are making progress. The report shows that new infections have been declining fastest in sub-Saharan Africa. In South Africa, the new infections are today less than half of what they were in 2010.
And following U.S. President Joe Biden's endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris, many leading Democrats are also backing Harris to run as the party's presidential nominee. Writing on social media, California Governor Gavin Newsom, who was expected to compete with her for the nomination, called her tough, fearless, and tenacious. Speaking to CBS News, the Democratic Congressman for Maryland, Jamie Raskin, said that Harris would make a formidable presidential candidate.
Kamala Harris is going to prosecute this case for democracy and freedom across the country. She will put abortion rights, birth control, IVF, the rights of women, the rights of health care, voting rights, democracy, right at the center of this campaign. And she will prosecute the case against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. She's going to be an extraordinarily powerful candidate.
The top story at 11 o'clock, 2 people have died in a house fire in Strandfontein Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Makhalemele.
S3 is bringing you the best in Indian cinema every Sunday at 2 p.m. Laugh, dance, get drawn into the drama, revved up with the action, and maybe, just maybe, shed a little tear. Catch Gagi on the 7th of July, Selfie on the 14th, Prince on the 21st, and Laila Majnu on the 28th. It's Indian cinema like you've never seen it before. Channel your best entertainment with Indian cinema only on S3. Open up.
S3. The countdown to the Paris Olympics 2024 is just days away. Live the intense rivalries, inspiring comebacks, and record-breaking performances from a wide variety of sporting disciplines such as aquatics, athletics, gymnastics, boxing, breakdancing, and football. Experience the Olympic Games Paris 2024 from Friday 26 July until Sunday 11 August. Live on SABC Sport, the proud broadcaster of the Olympic Games Paris 2024.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Good morning, our Cathy and the listeners. This is Nati from Cape Town. I'm one of the farmers there. I farm in Tavancho under the Barolong tribal authorities. I do livestock over there in a communal land. The problem with a communal land, the size of the land is too small, and secondly, we share the grazing, because I'm we grazing field, and that's opened me to the risk of a biosecurity, because you'll take care of your animals, someone that doesn't take care of their animals. So that thing is 50-50. Sometimes you could say okay, yes, the tribal authorities are helping out for guys there to be able to farm, but not in a way that maybe we expect them to do, because there's actually no space there to do that. If ever you go that side, you drive those sides, you'd see the overgrazing, there are no camps, everything. It's just that we are surviving. We're just farming for the sake of farming, to be honest. Thank you.
Hi, KV and team. I'm staying in one of the rural villages in the Northwest Province. There are acres and acres and acres of traditional land standing there unused. They even went as far as confiscating farms from the farmers in the surrounding area. However, that land you cannot get. You can go to the king, you can go to the chief, you can go anywhere. You will never get a piece of land, either for farming, for business development, you can pay them money, promise them money, or let me say you can propose to buy that land from them. They still refuse. So I think part of this land issue should be dealt with the government. It should be given back to COGTA, because traditional leaders, we are struggling. We are really struggling.
Hi, Cathy. Lunga, Western Cape. Just wanted to speak to the rural land granting issue. I've had a situation where I've requested plots of land from my mother's old ancestral village, and it's been 2 years, and I'm not sure what the holdup is. It's the headmen don't really, when they say administration, I don't know what administration they're referring to. My understanding traditionally is when you are awarded a piece of land, or if you get your old ancestral land, you wouldn't pay anything because you are technically from the village, and you'd have to go through a traditional way of opening said plot of land once you finish building, i.e. slaughter a cow, invite the community, etc., and then obviously welcome your ancestors, or ask them to welcome you back. So and it's private land that I'm requesting, but I also have a plan for agriculture, and there doesn't seem to be any movement. Anyway, just my experience. Cheers.
Good morning, Cathy and listeners. Anonymous, Ditsobotla. I agree with both Khosi Thabo, Seatlholo and Peter. They have a common knowledge because both of them are from Northwest. Here and there they differ, but mostly they agree because they are in the same province. The concern that Peter is raising might be coming from another provinces, whereby different provinces and different traditional leaders are doing something different on their land. And the other problem is that Department of Agriculture is really not helping much when it comes to small farmers. There's a lot that the department has to offer, but they don't go to the people or to the radio or to the televisions to tell the community about those assistance.
All right, thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes and just really your broad reflections on the issue of land, particularly when it comes to farming on communal land and also in rural areas. Look, I'll admit that obviously it's a mixed bag of experiences when it comes to people who want to access land, but we cannot run away from the fact that you do have instances where a lot of the difficulty is because of how traditional authorities do or don't do their jobs, and that has to be acknowledged. But you heard from Khosi Seatlholo that where there's an issue, go directly to the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders, and they will be best placed to intervene. Well, we're going to leave it there with that conversation and get into our final conversation of the day. In studio with me is somebody considered an influential voice on the continent, particularly when it comes to renewable energy and climate change interventions. She's also set to host the inaugural African Women in Leadership Summit during Women's Month. I understand it's in partnership with KPMG, and through it, they'll be wanting to drive meaningful change in the representation of women across the economy, but also to assess progress in gender diversity. While she recently formed part of a special edition of TEDx Johannesburg, as in TEDx Talks, and reflecting on the Sustainable Development Goals and finding common purpose in building a better world. Linda Mabena Olagunju is a renewable energy entrepreneur. She's in studio with me. Linda, good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Thanks for having me.
So it's quite a resume that you have there. So no pressure as we start off this conversation. But I think a good place to start will be just on the issue of energy. Number one, it is a sector where, when it comes to the representation of women, just on what you're going to be doing with your Africa Women in Leadership Summit, underrepresented, but also so closed off. Energy is something that affects each and every one of us in our daily lives, in whether it's in our homes, whether it's how we get around. We need energy to fuel our day-to-day activities. And yet it's a field that is so closed off. What made it possible for you? How did you get into it?
Good question, but I want to start off with where you say energy is such a big part of our day-to-day lives. So just to put it in context, 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity. We've heard that statistic over and over again. But we don't know what that means to the life of a girl child growing up in rural Africa. That means between 4 to 6 hours of that child's day taken out because they're fetching firewood to power the home. Ancillary to that is the water infrastructure. So if there's no electricity, it means it's very hard to then also have water pumps working in that village, and it means no access to water as well. So it impacts on education, it impacts on childhood. So it's a huge thing that impacts women, yet we do not have significant representation in the sector. How I got involved is I also grew up in a village in the Eastern Cape with no access to electricity, and I saw how my life changed when my parents moved us to a smaller town in Amtata, and I saw that I could read, I had running water. It made a huge difference in my life, and I wanted to find out how can I be part of solving some of our problems in Africa, because without access to electricity, it means you can't really grow your economies. So how I got involved is I was studying in Scotland in the UK. I worked as an admin assistant for a renewable energy company at the time that was developing Scotland's first offshore wind farm. And ironically, that was the wind farm that Donald Trump was opposing, that it shouldn't be built because it would ruin his view for his golf course. So first day on the job was me literally having to take on a fight against Donald Trump in the office. It did eventually get built, but more importantly for me, that opportunity opened my mind to the world of renewable energy. And I thought about how do I bring this back home? Because it was circa 2007, 2008 when we were going through our first bouts of load shedding heavily in the country. And at the time, South Africa only had a white paper on renewable energy. No one knew what it was about. I got involved as a lawyer, so I worked for a legal firm, Bowman Gilfillan, as well as Dewey and Leboff, which was an American law firm. And through that experience, I got involved in the energy sector, built up my resume. And then I realized I don't enjoy billable hours. I don't enjoy sitting on the other side of the table. I'd rather be the entrepreneur on the other side of the table. And that's how I got involved.
When I think about how you have described your own experience as a young girl in rural Eastern Cape, I think so much of our societies have actually been built around energy, deficiency, because even the role of women, what women are expected to do, right? If you're in a rural area as a woman, part of your job is to go out to get wood. Everything is centered around being able to create energy so that you can feed your family, so that they can bath, so that they can just be able to show up in the world as capable human beings. Now, when you work on the continent and you're raising awareness, if I was at my grandmother's house as a 4-year-old girl, there was nothing wrong with how I was living. If I was using a paraffin stove, there's nothing wrong with the paraffin stove. But when you come and you say, no, this is not the only way that it can be, there are alternatives. Often what What does that spark in way of conversation, in a way of possibilities for communities?
So, the very famous paraffin lamps and stoves that, that come with the fumes that have all caused us to either have, immune diseases, right, as a result of the fumes that are generated. When I went, for example, to Nigeria in 2010 at the height of the oil and gas industry, when oil was selling at $100 per barrel, and I'm here selling renewable energy, everyone laughed at me. Let's be honest. It's like, why would we leave a profitable business and start converting to renewables at this state? But as we've seen, the prices of oil have done what they've done. There's been divestment now because of the global pressure around climate change to diversify our energy sources. It's a different ballgame now. Renewables are much cheaper. So when you do have the discussions, people or your customer base is looking at cost. How can I save on cost by taking a clean alternative? Unlike oil and gas, it's not dependent on commodity price fluctuations. The sun is free. You buy the kit and you're good to go, right? So people have started looking at renewables from a different perspective and mainly focused on costs. And currently, the cost of renewables is far cheaper than, let's say, coal and other renewable energy sources. And also there's a lot more support and it's a lot more affordable even to communities. So clean cooking toolkits, for example, in rural areas are making a round now. South Africa, not so much. I think we tend to be forgotten because they tend to see us as a very developed nation. But there are rural areas there that need those toolkits for the clean cooking. So you still find a lot of rural communities still using firewood, which leads to deforestation, which leads to other climate issues and sustainability issues in those villages as well. So the conversation, I would say, Cathy, has gotten a bit more positive over the years.
South Africa itself has been talking about the just energy transition and, the need for decarbonization, cleaner energy. And yet, when we look very specifically to the detail, there are no specific time references that are given as to when exactly we want to have transitioned from our current reliance on fossil fuels. So what that tells us is that we're going to be using fossil fuels for still some time yet, not only in this country, but also in this continent. What does that mean for our sustainable development goals that, of course, we've subscribed to in the UN on the one end? But what does it mean also for entrepreneurs like yourselves? Because you do your work in an environment where you know that the emphasis and where the actual spend of government is still largely on your fossil fuels.
Good question. And I'll take it in two parts. I think we need to be careful when we're looking at the just energy transition, and a lot of people don't really know what it means. The pillars of the just energy transition is that it must be fair, right, to the economies and societies and communities, and it must be equitable and it must be sustainable, right? When you look at how the world is set up, the global north basically built their industry on fossil fuels. They industrialized on fossil fuels. I go back to 600 million Africans without access to electricity. That means we emit very little when it comes to the global emissions. We're less than 5%. Yet we're expected to decarbonize at the same rate as the global north. The question that comes to my mind is, who is going to fund this decarbonization? African leaders have said they need $1.3 trillion from the year 2025 per annum going forward in order to decarbonize. Only $100 billion has been committed, and none of that has actually really been dispersed. So the first issue with the just energy transition is the funding mechanism. So we may talk here at a high level and say we want to reach these goals by 2030. So SDG 7 says clean, affordable electricity by 2030. We're in 2024. And that's 6 years to the target date, and we're still sitting at that 600 million Africans figure. Then you go to the net zero by 2050. Again, we keep setting these goals, but are we really serious when you're not putting the money on the table, right? They always say, put the money down and the rest will follow. the global north is doing this dance between us and them and expecting us to effectively pay for the sins that we didn't, or the crisis we didn't cause. The second thing we really need to be careful about is that African economies are heavily reliant on hydrocarbon generating sectors, such as the production of oil and gas, as well as coal. South Africa holds 3% of the world's reserves on coal. In this country, coal employs over 100,000 people in Mpumalanga. You need to know how you're going to plug those jobs, and it's a very important discussion. And one thing that disturbs me is there isn't much focus on the skills. So when they do focus on skills, they focus on artisans, they focus on engineers. But what happens to the people who are currently in the grey that service the hydrocarbon sector? How do we pivot them to be able to service the renewable energy sector as well? And we've started building that awareness through our DLO Skills Initiative, where we're trying to host workshops to train people to convert their current businesses to be able to take advantage of the green economy. But we also have to be honest that renewable energy is a high-tech industry that is built to operate on less jobs once it's operational. So the jobs are a lot when it's during construction, over 3,000 jobs created, as an example, by a wind farm when it's in construction. But when it is in operation, those jobs drop down to about 24 full-time equivalent jobs. So until we understand how do you then create jobs, you need to create an ecosystem and a supply chain. Are we manufacturing in South Africa? No, we're not. We imported 17 billion rands worth of solar panels last year alone. Imported. That shouldn't be happening. We should be producing solar panels here. We should be exporting to the rest of Africa. We're not doing that. We need strategic leadership to say, yes, the just energy transition has to happen. Our climate is in crisis. We all understand that. But how does Africa remove itself from being a provider of raw materials and cheap labor, as it has been in various forms of industrializations, to say, how do we position ourselves this time around to be at the forefront? The DRC gives the renewable energy sector 70% of its cobalt, right? Cobalt produces electrical vehicles and the batteries that renewable energy uses to store. That cobalt is being taken out of the continent to European markets, to North America, like Tesla, your iPhones, etc. We're not thinking strategically as a continent still. And that's what concerns me. It's not that there's any issue with the just energy transition. It's just that African leaders need to start thinking holistically about how we benefit.
Where do you think part of that gap might be, Linda? Is it because, again, these industries are quite closed off, very difficult to understand the inner workings, very difficult to understand the value chains, especially for politicians who are often literally just going from one report to another, right? And they're expected to sign off on this, no, reject that, do this, don't do that. And if we are to think about the low-hanging fruit, is that something that is in the hands of entrepreneurs like yourself? Or is it in the hands of the politicians?
It's both, Cathy. I don't they say ignorance of the law does not exempt you from breaking the law.
Yeah.
So I think ignorance of policy should not exempt you as a policymaker from understanding the policies that you're implementing, right? And there's a lot of us industry experts in the country. You're quite correct. It's a high barrier of entry, but also there's a lot of gatekeeping. Right. So let me give you a simple thing of one of the things we do in our workshops. There was a lady who had an industrial window cleaning company, just window cleaning. You see, all of us know what window cleaning is. We converted that lady's business into a solar panel cleaning company. She could make that pivot, right? Because it's the same sort of concept that you're going to use, but obviously there's a few technical things that need to happen there. Or a guy who trucks coal. How do you convert his truck to truck the very long wind turbines, right? That's $1 million sort of contract to do that logistics work. The issue is awareness. People don't know what opportunities are available in the renewable energy sector that are all encompassing. They think it's reserved for only the engineers and super smart people. I'm a lawyer. I'm not an engineer. I'm a lawyer by training, and I landed up in a very technical field, but I learned on the job. If I could do it, many people can do it.
I love the example that you've given of the cleaning because, again, so often for those who are able to access that in the industry, it is at that level. You are probably one of the exceptions to the rule, or to what one finds in industry as a whole. Why is there so much gatekeeping, it seems, but even at a level of who gets to participate and be active in the industry and really be able to have a sustainable business?
There is, and I mean, it's reflective of the entire South African economy insofar as, I mean, let's be honest about it. We the black majority, are still excluded from a lot of sectors, right? But it also boils down to how serious is government in enforcing their policies. We've got beautifully written policies, the best constitution in the world. So even when you read the renewable energy policy, it calls for black economic empowerment with operational involvement. But no one actually audits the operational involvement of the black parties in this consortia. Are they just holding shares, or are they active participants? Could they replicate building this wind farm on their own? We're 13 years into this sector, and I would like to see a top-down empowered company. I mean, when I say top-down, meaning the wind farm is owned by black companies or empowered companies, and the actual engineering is being done by black engineers. That's how you build an economy, right? By localization, by inclusion. What you're finding is that there may be black shareholding, but there's very limited. I can count the number of us black-owned companies that are operational participants. And that, to me, 13 years later, is not acceptable.
We're going to continue the conversation with Linda Mabena Olagunju. She is a renewable energy entrepreneur, also then going to be hosting the inaugural African Women in Leadership Summit. We'll do that just after the latest headlines.
A very good morning to you with the news headlines. A head-on collision on the R40 road in Hazyview, Mpumalanga has claimed 4 lives. 2 people have died in a house fire in Stransfontein Mitchell's Plain in Cape Town. And Trade and Industry Minister Pakstau will this week lead a South African delegation to the 21st African Growth and Opportunity Act Forum in Washington, D.C. Details of these and other stories at midday.
Mohlahlana on SAFM.
All right, we continue the conversation on the talking point. We're looking at sustainable development, and in particular within the energy space, speaking to entrepreneur Linda Mabena Olagunju, who is a renewable energy entrepreneur. So let's talk about how then your experiences as an entrepreneur have, I guess, whether directly or indirectly, sort of put you in the spotlight, because you're one of the few black faces running a black entity in the renewable energy space. You then become a leader, right? And when we talk about representation, this is what it means. Now, all other black people, especially women who want to be in the space, they're like, well, if Linda can do it, I'm sure I can also give it a try. So it's put you in the forefront. How have you managed that experience? And I think the expectation that also comes with being in a position like that.
Yeah, you're asking really good questions, Cathy. Yeah, I mean, and they say that, when you're given this opportunity, you have a responsibility. So for me, I've almost been trying to lift as I rise. Mm-hmm. Since inception, even before I'd arrived on any platform, even before we had built the wind farm, I've always sort of said, how do we open the door for people that look like me? Because I've always understood from early on, there is no value in being the only black person in the boardroom or black woman in the boardroom, because then you do not have people to support you, right? And you can't impact much change. So the more diverse the boardrooms are, the more you can actually have impact. You can't do impact alone. So I started off with various initiatives, like we have an energy summit, which is about opening up the energy sector for young, people that look like me. Well, I'm older now, but like people that looked like me when I was 27 and I started in this sector. And also with the African Women in Leadership Summit, what we're trying to do is talk about opportunities. So whenever we have Women's Month, I always get annoyed. It's like, it's great. They give us flowers and it's pink and it's fluffy. We don't want flowers, guys. We want deals. We want opportunities. We want money. And women are highly overtrained. We're always actually overqualified on paper. And we're not really being given the opportunities that I think we are deserving of. And that also is about being in the room with the right people. So I wanted to create a summit where it's not just us complaining amongst ourselves. We have men in the room and across different sectors. So it's not just energy. So Vodacom is one of our big supporters, and the Vodacom CEO is on there in the room. And, he has made commitments to saying this is where our ExCo sits in terms of representation. So at this summit, we want serious business people that are really going to implement change and not just give us a talk shop. So that's number one. Number two, the skills initiative, which we started last year. We've done trainings for companies like Eskom, Sasol, because the just energy transition is here, whether we like it or not. And our focus has been on SMMEs and micro enterprises and youth. We have a high youth unemployment rate on this continent and in this country in particular. And yet the sector offers a lot of opportunities for them if they only know how to access and tap into them. So those are the two things I've done from a leadership perspective to say, how do I bring my people along on the journey? And also speaking openly and honestly about the sector. Unfortunately, people are too afraid to speak and say, guys, we're not where we ought to have been 13 years later, because everyone is afraid of being shut out of deals, etc. But let's be honest, guys, are you holding shares or are you actually an active participant where you're holding shares?
When you have conversations, what do you find to be the biggest challenge? Because we all know when people are gathered in an auditorium, there's a beautiful energy about it, and suddenly, if I had committed that, actually we're going to bring in X amount of young people, X amount of women, when the vibe of the moment has been created, I'm like, actually, I'm going to up, we're upping the commitment,
Yeah.
because that's what the moment almost asks for. And then the event is done and people are following up. Their emails are ignored. Their calls are not answered. So how do you make sure that while there could well be that goodwill, it's actually followed through on, and that it's not just another exercise of getting people's hopes up only to be dashed again? And you're an entrepreneur. You know exactly what that feels like.
I definitely do. And I must say, from a corporate perspective, we've been very lucky to work with partners that take representation seriously, and they've come back to account on their numbers between the years to say this is where we're sitting at ESCO. I gave the Vodacom example. The CEO doesn't just speak about it, he implements it in his direct team, and we've been fortunate to work with companies that do a lot of that. But I think also, to be honest though, a lot of no's are going to be on the journey of any entrepreneur. I think the biggest thing is to have the skill and the skin to be able to accept rejection, but not to give up. I've had more no's in my journey than yeses, and they're consistent blows, but it doesn't stop you. And one of the big feedback we've gotten from the conference, because this is the second one we're having this year, from last year, for example, they said, many people say that we're able to close this and this deal as a result of this summit. So the people who are in that room are of high caliber, people who are actually, and you'd be surprised, Cathy, they're people who are looking to fill their supply chains and saying, we can't find the black women. Okay, we've brought them to you. No more excuses.
What is it that you think the women of this country, the women of this continent need to hear, need to know about this moment? that we're in order to position themselves to fully be able to take advantage of whatever opportunities may exist, regardless of the sector they may exist in?
I believe if you need to really invest in your mental mindset, invest in career coaching or in individual coaching or in therapy, because I think the biggest thing that we have is this inferiority complex and a lack of worthiness as women. I can take you to Harvard. You may have the Oxford degrees, you may have everything, but if you do not feel worthy, you're not going to be able to show up for yourself. And you will be surprised at the number of mediocre men. I'm sorry, and I'm not being sexist, but there is a number of mediocre men in key positions right now, less qualified. But the difference is men are audacious most of the time. They have, we say it usually in the context of relationships, and when we're joking that, the audacity of this guy. No, men are audacious even around opportunities that they're not qualified for. Whereas with women, we're like, oh no, I'm not ready, I'm not qualified, or I need to do an additional course. No, you're never ready. The only thing you need to really try and work on is your mental.
Yeah. Sure. It's so profound for me that will be the message that you share. In fact, you're reminding me of a conversation that we did with that we had with Harambee, and we were talking about, they of course work in the youth space and deal with a lot of projects around youth development, and I asked them what is the one thing that they often see when it comes to young people that go through their training programs that, if you're a young person you're listening to, you could take up. And they said, the one thing that we need to do is teach our young people confidence, because so many of them walk into our doors and leave our doors, but they still do not believe that they are capable of making an impact, of entering certain spaces, or even worthy of being able to do that. So I think it just struck me, as you said it, that confidence can be such a big stumbling block to us being able to achieve our dreams and pursue them beyond just the systemic issues that we might face.
No, it's a big deal. And I mean, I've spoken to other female execs who've done female leadership programs, and they say to me, Linda, we struggle the most. And I mean, I'm not talking C-suite women here, women who are in the public eye, who you'd know. But the biggest issue is that worthiness and self-worth, and that, just to get to that next gear. So you find some people achieve to this level, but to get to that top 1% of performance, there's a different sort of confidence that's required and a vision focus, because you're constantly going to be told you're not good enough, you don't belong, you don't have enough money to, there's always going to be those negatives. You need to pull yourself out of that pit, and no amount of degrees or money is going to get you out of there. So I think if we start investing in that personal development a bit earlier, it would go a long way. And I've noticed now in executive programs, I'm doing some, and there's a huge focus on that personal development piece, which wasn't there a while ago, because they're starting to recognize that if you don't get this piece right, you're going to have a challenge here.
Linda Mabena, thank you so much for coming into studio. Linda Mabena Olagunju is a renewable energy entrepreneur, and of course they're also going to be hosting the African Women in Leadership Summit. As you heard, is the second year. I've been saying it's the inaugural year, so correction on my part on that score. All of the best, Linda, and hopefully we'll have you back in studio again sometime in the near future.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That's also where we wrap it up on the talking point for today. The show back with you again tomorrow between 9 and midday. Have a lovely afternoon. Up next is the book reading.
Every year, 30,000 missionaries are called to serve the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints across the globe, the largest full-time missionary force of any church. Most are under 25 and away from home for up to 2 years, and the biggest training center in Europe is located in Chorley, Lancashire. The Mormons Are Coming follows the journey of 3 young missionaries through the first few months of training and work in the field, which can make or break them. Tune into The Mormons Are Coming, Thursdays at 10 p.m. Channel your best dockies with BBC Primetime, only on S3. Open up.
The Rockets are assigned to question the German way of the beautiful game in a South African style. They want to start the new season with a coveted trophy, but FC Augsburg want to conclude their tour to Mzansi with a great result leading to the new German Bundesliga season. Mpumalanga province will vibrate when TS Galaxy and FC Augsburg lock horns. This is the Mpumalanga Premiers International Cup 2024. Catch the spectacular contest between TS Galaxy FC and FC Augsburg on Saturday, 27 July at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Tickets are available at CompuTickets. Proudly brought to you by the TS Galaxy Foundation and SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of The Door, an addict's journey, read by Simpson Kumalo.
I had chosen this path of addiction, and only death and destruction was lurking in the shadows. I had deteriorated, and everything about me was gone, just a shadow. A mere shadow of myself was left. I could see that. I did not need a genius to tell me that. These people that I met on the streets that were friends, all telling me, "Oh, you have lost so much weight, are you okay?" Some of them that I had not seen for the longest of time had the audacity to ask me, "Oh man, Abner, is that you? What happened? You look sick." I would abruptly and defensively respond, "Yeah, I'm good, and I'm on diet, thank you very much." I would have this murderous look on my face, and I guess the weight loss did not hide the stress and the strain that I suffered at the hands of crack. Come to think of it, I'm sure some of them did not mean any harm. They just cared and wanted to see me well. With addiction, though, and the paranoia, I was always thinking some idiot was talking about me in the corner. Even when I was in rehab, that paranoia still had me big time. I was self-conscious, and my self-esteem had taken a knock, and anytime anyone mentioned anything negative to me, it just sunk me even further to the abyss. The world was now foreign to me, and I was sinking and sinking in a big black hole with no one to save me. I could hear voices of reason trying to knock some sense into me, but I just did not have enough strength to welcome them. It felt like my life was in somebody's hands, and it was remotely controlled. It could be a matter of time before I inhaled my last puff, snort my last line, or swallow that last pill before I showed up before my maker with nothing to say. Drugs have led me to a one-way street, and I was hopelessly lost. I felt empty and hollow. I even now and then would see my funeral with my loved ones surrounding my coffin. Finally, I was not afraid of dying. Death was not a scare for me. What was a scare was dying prematurely with unfulfilled dreams. What scared me most was arriving in heaven and being told that I had underachieved. I wanted to do more, do better, and I knew that my life was meant to be more than what it was. Now I'm dead, and my funeral and my death have caused so much pain. My mother, oh my God, how could I have been so cruel? I was her lastborn, and there I was, eaten to the bone by drugs, something I could have prevented and overcome with will and determination. I was cruel. She suffered and suffered greatly in the hands of a brutal system that dehumanized her in her ripe old age. Instead of resting and enjoying her children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, I added further injury, and I was killing her slowly as she was burying her favorite son. So who could blame France? I mean, deep down, I was feeling equally the same. But I just knew that I did not want the life of drugs and alcohol anymore. I guess, though, we were not wired the same. With recovery, you have to want it really bad enough for you to make it. You have to be willing to be subjected to taking all kinds of abuses from strangers you just met in rehab who already have had an opinion about your life. These twits think that they know you better than yourself. This was the place to deal with your demons, and the truth of the matter is that you are not alone in this conundrum. You had to be strong-willed and never take insults and attacks personally. I knew they knew what they are doing, and it was definitely not to harm me, but to get me well. I was a patient in a hospital who wanted to tell doctors what to do. That is not how it is done. I can understand where Franz was coming from. The majority of addicts in the center, truth be told, felt the same way. There were some who'd be checked in by their family members, and you'd really think that this person has great prospects at recovery given how they sunk their teeth in the routine of the daily program. Next minute, you hear that they have escaped and gone back to addiction. The pull and craving of drugs remains truly indescribable. The facade they put was just to fool everyone to make them believe that they are in the program and are willing to stay the course. My friend Franz was no different. He was the only child and looked spoiled to me. He was a little shy and reserved, but boy, when you got to know him, he spoke his mind to the hilt. He practically had everything at his beck and call and seemed to be not in the mood to be bothered with recovery. He was passing time and wanted to be out of there as soon as he could. He was forced to be there by his parents and was threatened with disownership if he did not go through with the program. He was very Afrikaans and we tolerated each other. Fellow recovering addicts fighting for our dear lives. He was younger than me and naturally would finish his life story quicker than mine, and this gave me an opportunity to understand what it meant to pass or fail a life story. Needless to say, we buried our heads into the work that was before us, independently, of course. I gave it my all and wrote my life story in 45 pages. It was genuine and from the heart. There was no other way to write except from the heart, and once I started, I could not put the pen down. For the first time, while writing my life story, I figured in my heart of hearts perhaps I had a chance at recovery. I'd been to 2 rehabs before this one, and without comparing really, this was more thorough and they took time to engage their residents. Perhaps I was now ready to deal decisively with the madness and chaos of my addiction. I should not ascribe blame really to the other rehabs. After all, it is the individual who must decide that they are done with drugs. Maybe I was not psychologically ready to quit. You really have to know in your heart of hearts that is it. You are done with that type of life. Everyone, whether new resident or old resident, everyone was writing something. Even if you did not feel like writing, the atmosphere was all about writing and constantly presenting your writings either to counselors, fellow addicts, or to a group. So you really could not escape writing. Any chance you got, you were putting pen to paper. Your free time, early mornings, late night, weekends was characterized by writing. So you really could not escape writing during free time. It looked like if you did not like writing or were lazy, you would really have a hard time coping with the pressure, and at any rate, you ran the risk of being taken to task by the group for laziness and flying under the radar. Once I made up my mind that I would write, boy, it was like a well springing out my inner core, and it just flowed. I was there in the moment and did not leave anything unsaid. All the childhood memories came like a ton of bricks. At the crack of dawn, I was up and writing. Every opportunity I got, I wrote. I went through all kinds of emotions. All sorts of emotions just came through, rushing in my head. It was my life story, and I did not care about being marked. I was going to pour my heart out. I was descriptive, detailed, thorough, and completely transparent about where I'd come from and how ultimately I landed in rehab. I soon discovered I needed more pages to write as there was too much to write, and it just came to me. Amidst tears, laughter, and depression, I poured my heart into those pages. I became for the very first time in touch with myself, and I understood in 2 weeks where I'd been and how I landed in rehab. It took a lot out of me. I felt drained and tired every night. I only stopped writing when they switched lights off. Finally, I was done with my life story, and As it is the custom of rehab, once done, you had to hand over your life story to the office. So I did exactly that. I went to my room and felt some sort of relief that I could not explain. What an emotional roller coaster ride. Ready to read it to the group. I was nervous and wondered how they would receive it. These groups can be cruel sometimes. I'd seen it being done to other addicts and it wasn't a pretty sight. They intentionally get under your skin. Big group was every day, Monday to Thursday. No one looked forward to group. It was ruthless, confrontational, and downright up-in-your-face type of stuff. No mincing of words. Blue was blue. There were no gray areas. You knew exactly what they were saying. That's why you keep no friends, as the very same friends would betray you in half given a chance. The counselors had a knack of taking people apart. To say it was intense is an understatement. It was normally around 10 in the morning and we had no clue what was on the agenda. Of course, there were other smaller groups, more intimate but equally engaging in nature. I was new in the game of processing stuff and getting in touch with your inner self. I was really new, and as an African child growing up, there was no counseling available for us. If there was, I never took notice, nor did I have the need for such intervention. A month or so had passed, and I had been given a slot and a team of receiving addicts to whom I was going to read my life story. My life story was taken from me a couple of days, and I was now full bona fide participant in the daily activities of the center. I was immersed, albeit for a few reservations, into my programs. I was assigned to a group of 20 recovering addicts and a counselor, and the date for the showdown was set. The rules were set, and on the day of the reading, I was called by my counselor, and they handed me my life story notebook, and I was informed I'm only to open and read once the group has been assembled and the formalities done. I whispered a prayer and gave it all to God. The addicts were chosen according to their status and progress in rehab. They more than likely had been there for 3 months and above, and were showing serious signs of progress in their recovery. They were getting the hang of recovery and were committed soldiers in fighting hard for their recovery. There was also an element of wanting to impress the center counselors and would do everything according to the book. I recalled in my welcome group after I had been there for a week. I was welcomed by these people in a group format. They made me feel welcomed. It was the tradition of rehab that every new and incoming addict be welcomed with open arms in open forum by fellow recovery addicts. I was heartily welcomed for most part positively. Most messages I received in my welcome group were warm. Stay the course. You're not here to make friends. There are no secrets in rehab. No dating is allowed. Focus on your recovery and you will do well. Be afraid of group were some of the messages I received. The one that stuck to me and was etched in my mind was that I must not give up my seat. It's going to be a bumpy ride. By not giving up my seat, no matter how hard and difficult my road to recovery in rehab, I must not throw in the towel. I must stick it out, take all the pressure that comes with it. Well, they did not know that even though I had taken a beating in my drugging and looked frail and somewhat worn out, and for the most part quiet and keeping to myself, I was not at all the giving up type. I was the first one to arrive for my reading and was eager to go through it. Naturally, I was in a pensive mood and did not speak nor greet anyone. I was anxious. A barrage of emotions had engulfed me. My thoughts were everywhere as I thought hard about the damage I had done. I was to be in rehab for a minimum of 5 months, and this was practically my first month. I was not sure if I could stick it out. This was the first time the spotlight would be on me. Furthermore, I was about to read my life story to almost total strangers, and they were to comment on the veracity of the story. Every 20 of them must comment about my story and thereafter give feedback to the counselors whether I was genuine or not, or they felt I left some stuff out. They were lethal, these addicts, and pulled no punches. I did not know if they were trying to please the counselors or they were genuinely helping. The addicts were not so friendly towards each other. I was no exception. They went overboard with me, though. I opened my notebook after the formalities that are routine for every group that is held. We stand up, hold hands, a short prayer, and straight into the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I went straight into my life story. I buried my head in my notes and went for it. I read with a touch of seriousness and, I believe, eloquence. I was reading over 40 pages of my life, and to my knowledge, I was honestly sincere, and I had poured out what I wanted to pour out. Of course, I was not completely transparent. It was my first time in this type of environment, and I'm not necessarily sure what to expect. I still had trust issues with this place, and my socialization and upbringing had stood in the way of me being a completely open book. Even though I was not absolutely forthright and I had not practically gone through this process before, I had followed the rules nonetheless. I discovered in my writing process that there were hidden memories and things I went through that were buried deep down within. I got a bit scared and did not know where that came from.
That was another episode of The Door, an addict's journey written by Abner Mariri. The book is available on www.abner.africa. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursday on The Talking Point. It is produced for the station by Vovi Patala, read by Samson Kumalo, technical production by Nanda Koza.
Well, it's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 22nd of July, 2024. A very warm welcome to Updated Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour...
Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America?
Well, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris seeks to become the first black woman president in the United States, and...
We are not a part of this, they call it the government of national unity, or whatever they call it. We're not part of that. We will vote and support the ANC on an executive level, on an issue-by-issue basis.
Herman Mashaba's Action SA revises its position on working with the ANC in the Johannesburg Metro. Coming up in sport.
Records broken all over the place in the world of sports, and Thurston Lawrence came this close at the Open.
John will tell us more about it in the second half of the show. But in the meantime, let us know what's on your mind. You can write to us via SMS on 41391, charge at R1.50 per SMS. You can also send us your messages via X or Facebook, our handle at SABC News_radio, or using the hashtag #UpdateAtNoon, or send us a WhatsApp voice note on 0826923909. Well, these and more stories coming up on this Monday edition of Updated Noon. First, though, let's bring you up to speed with the latest news. Here's Mudupi Mohlahlana.
Thank you very much, Sister Sakina. The top stories at midday. Ramaphosa responds to the OPA debate, and Bangladesh remains tense. A very good afternoon. President Cyril Ramaphosa has thanked members of parliament for participating in what is described as a robust and enriching debate of his opening of parliament address. He gave his reply to the joint debate which took place on Friday.
The speeches that were delivered in the whole of Friday clearly demonstrate that there is a common appreciation amongst members of this august parliament that a debate of this nature, and indeed the work of this parliament, is about something far bigger, far more important than just mere politics. It is about the future of our country and its people. It is about a future of opportunity.
A head-on collision on the R40 in Hazyview, Mpumalanga has claimed 4 lives. The people were killed when a light delivery vehicle and a sports utility vehicle collided head-on this morning. The deceased were occupants of the SUV and the driver of the bakkie. An investigation is underway to establish the actual cause of the crash. Motorists have been urged to be extra careful when driving on the roads. 2 people have died in a house fire in Strandfontein Mitchells Plain in Cape Town. Fire and rescue spokesperson Jermaine Carlser says a double-story house caught alight and authorities were notified in the early hours of this morning. He says 2 other people sustained burn wounds.
2 adults, a man and woman, were treated for smoke inhalation. Unfortunately, a woman and a young girl sustained fatal burn wounds. A building inspector was requested as the former house sustained substantial structural damages. The cause of the fire is yet to be determined, and the scene was handed over to the South African Police Service.
Residents of a new informal settlement in Nana's Farm in Lenasia on the south of Joburg have barricaded the N12 with burning tires and debris in a service delivery protest over a lack of water and electricity in their area. Abu Bakr Asfad Road and Klipspruit Valley Road are affected. Police are on the scene. Metro Police spokesperson Xolani Fihla has urged motorists to use alternative routes.
Police have been dispatched in the area. Expect heavy delays as motorists are urged to exercise caution, avoid and use alternative routes such as R554 Nirvana Drive and Golden Highway or Chris Honey Road travelling through Soweto.
Trade and Industry Minister Pakstawu will this week lead a South African delegation to the 21st African Growth and Opportunity Act AGOA Forum in Washington, D.C. In a statement, his department says the delegation would comprise of representatives from government, the private sector, civil society, and organized labor. The AGOA Forum rotates annually between the USA and an African country. Our correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Peace.
This week's forum follows a successful hosting of the 20th AGOA Forum in Johannesburg last November that highlighted the vibrant regional value chains being developed within the African continent. The visit is seen as an opportunity to engage important stakeholders, including members of Congress, the U.S. administration, as well as the U.S. business community. The delegation is also expected to use the forum to push back against legislation that has passed the House of Representatives, requiring a full assessment of the bilateral relationship between the US and South Africa over dissatisfaction with Pretoria's foreign policy positions and their national security implications for the US. The bill has yet to be taken up by the Senate and would need to be signed by the President to become law. Sherwin Bryce-Peace, SABC News, New York.
And Bangladesh remains tense, with some students having vowed to continue protests a day after the Supreme Court scrapped most of the government job quotas they were demonstrating against. More than 150 people have been killed in a week of violence. The BBC's Yogita Lemaye.
Some students have said they will not stop their campaign until the government implements the Supreme Court's order and the people responsible for the deaths of protesters are brought to justice. Security forces are accused of cracking down on unarmed students, a charge the government rejects. Many have described the violence over the past week as the worst they've ever seen. There's been a near blackout of internet and phone communication since Friday. The unrest is among the most serious challenges Sheikh Hasina has faced in 15 consecutive years as Bangladesh's Prime Minister.
The top story, President Cyril Ramaphosa has thanked members of parliament for participating in what is described as a robust and enriching debate of his opening of parliament address. Back to you, SK, for SAFM News. Kemudupi Makhalemeli.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Thanks so much, Mudupi. Good afternoon, everybody. 7 minutes after 12 on this Monday. And thanks for being with us here on Update at Noon. So quite a bit happening at the moment as we speak. President Cyril Ramaphosa is still addressing the joint sitting there in response to that debate that took place after his opening of Parliament address last Thursday. So are we keeping an eye on that? And we'll play some of that back for you. Joint sitting of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, of course. And then Action SA briefing the media on the outcomes of its Senate meeting. And this, of course, relating to the change in their position of not working with the ANC. I seem to recall Herman Mashaba being, quite clear in his stance about the ANC and not working with the ANC, about going into the elections for the sole purpose of bringing down the ANC, removing them from power. And I think, if I remember correctly, Herman Mashaba said that if they were to ever work with the ANC, he would resign. But I guess this is the clearest, latest indication yet about politics and just how it works. No permanent friends, no permanent enemies, and no permanent positions. It is what it is. Things move, people move, and policies can change as well. So that Action SA briefing will bring you some of that in a short while. Some of the other stories that we are, of course, watching: the Judicial Conduct Tribunal probing the complaint that was lodged by Unite Behind against suspended Judge Tintswalo Makubele. That reconvened earlier this morning at 10, and Makubele is accused of violating the separation of powers principle by allegedly being both a judge and the chairperson of a state-owned entity, which was, of course, PRASA at the time. So we'll speak to Zoleka Kodashe watching that one for us. A few court cases that we also keenly watching. The Senzo Mayiwa trial also reconvened this morning. 5 men on trial for the murder of the Bafana captain was killed in 2014, and 4 people arrested in connection with that multi-billion rand drug bust on that farm in Groblersdal. They are expected to appear in the local magistrates court, so we'll bring you up to speed with that as well. And of course, after a series of postponements and delays, the pre-trial conference of former ANC Limpopo Treasurer General Danny Msiza and his co-accused implicated in the looting of VBS Bank, that also got underway in the Pretoria High Court today. So those just some of the stories. There are quite a few others bouncing around, but let's see how far we can get.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
Now, Action SA says that it has agreed in principle to work with the ANC in the Johannesburg Metro only if the ANC immediately removes the current Joburg Mayor, Kabelo Gwamanda. Now, the party president, Herman Mashaba, has added that the second condition that the ANC has agreed to commit to in order to get the support is the immediate reversal of the 200 Rand charge that's been imposed by City Power on prepaid users. Now, Mashaba, along with his senior party members, have been addressing the media following the Senate meeting of Action SA at the weekend. Here's Mashaba explaining the party's revised position on working with the ANC.
So we said to the ANC, you guys, you headed this mayor to play a role that this job is way beyond him. So please, the only way we are prepared to really support you, we need the removal of this mayor. As Michael has also indicated, including our caucus leader, we want the withdrawal of this 200 rands electricity charge by City Power. Completely unfair. There's money that City Power can collect from illegal connections and so forth. Go aggressive. Why then punish law-abiding citizens? So we said this must obviously be withdrawn. We also made it clear to them, and I think I'm really pleased that the Premier is fully behind this, because the previous mayor, when I was the mayor, never gave the support to the inner city rejuvenation plan for provision of affordable housing for South Africans. So we are going to embark on a massive program for the inner city rejuvenation, where we reignite this program so that over 300,000 housing backlog, because imagine when I took over in 2016, we're sitting at 300,000. I don't know what the number is, but without any doubt, must be much worse. So the only way we're going to address this, we are not going to wait for national government to provide housing, RDP housing. We want our people to live in the city, close to where they work. And we will ensure that we protect them. We are unapologetically going to declare war against criminality in the city. including illegal immigration. Now working with the province, with South African police services, with JNPD, you are going to see the acceleration of dealing with illegal immigration. Those who are in our country illegally, those who are in our country committing crime, we are going to deal with them. Whether you're South African or a foreign national, we are going to deal with you. We are going to expedite the question of the management of illegal trade in our city. We cannot accept that the businesses in our communities are run by people who, in the first place, we don't know who they are, how they came into this country, how they brought money into this country. Did this money come through mattresses or sofas? And they send them through mattresses and sofas. That is going to come to an end. We have to commit in ensuring that we respect the bylaws of this country. Everyone running business in this country must be registered with the South African Revenue Services. So we're going to have special units with JMPD working with South African Police Services to ensure that the bylaws of this country are protected. Businesses cannot run by people who are in our country illegally. So we want the businesses in our communities to run by our own people because they will pay taxes, they will employ our people. And I think the Premier has given us a commitment in that regard. Importantly, something that Michael raised, we are not a part of this they call it the government of national unity, or whatever they call it. We're not part of that. We will vote and support the ANC on an executive level on an issue-by-issue basis. And the reason why it's important not to really have an agreement, once bitten, twice shy.
That was Action SA party leader Brahman Mashaba. Meanwhile, the party's chairperson, Michael Beaumont, added that this new arrangement is not a coalition agreement with the ANC.
Action SA is not entering the National Grand Coalition. We are, in fact, taking our position nationally, and we are extending it down into municipalities in a manner that is consistent with the principle of a constructive opposition. South Africans expect post the 29th of May that political parties deliver in their interests, and they are less concerned about what the configurations of those governments look like. I think it is also accurate to say, because we must play fair and we must be clear, is that our position has had to change since the 29th of May. We've always been a political party that has been unequivocal on the question of not working with the ANC. And I think while we may hold the view that this is not a coalition arrangement and not a co-governance arrangement, we must also be clear. To say that we cannot work with another political party can no longer be the case after the 29th of May. We must work together with every political party, and the measurement of our work should only be whether that work is serving the interests of that municipality and its residents and how it is delivering as a return on investment. We cannot sit back as Action SA and allow a metro like Johannesburg to decline and decay the way it has, and sit on our hands, our 44 pairs of hands in Johannesburg, by clinging to a principle that we will not work with other political parties. Change takes place in the political environment, and if we aren't going to be dinosaurs, we too have to change and adapt to the changes happening in our political environment. We also, however, must say that we remain unequivocal in the fact that we remain a principled organization. We remain an organization that when you compare what we have said before and what we do now, we remain the most consistent of any political party in South Africa, certainly, and that has been proven time and time again, including in the establishment of this National Grand Coalition and Action SA's positioning there too.
And that was Action SA chairperson Michael Beaumont. All of this from a press briefing that took place a short while ago. Please let us know your thoughts on this.
Shopping sprees, catching flights while others catch feelings, shaking that thing while sipping on some bubbles on a yacht in Dubai. Some call it living soft. You know, njo for njo. Tune into Sugar Baby Dating, a highly revealing documentary that lifts the lid of the sugar baby dating phenomenon and talks to girls who have a string of rich older men funding their lifestyles and the women that feel damaged by the whole experience. This Thursday at 10 p.m. Is it just a little frivolous fun? Or is there a sinister side to sugar baby dating? Channel your inner curiosity with Sugar Baby Dating, 11 July at 10 p.m. Only on S3. Open up.
Greatness has a way of overcoming all the obstacles. South Africa is readmitted into the International Olympic Committee. The Afrika Dzonga flag was flown by marathoner Dan Dow at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games Barcelona 1992. Elana Meyer rose to the occasion with a silver medallion in the women's 10,000 meters. While tennis doubles pairing of Wayne Ferreira and Pete Nordval grabbed another silver.
Second and silver medalist representing South Africa, Wayne Ferreira and Pete Nordval.
Team Africa Jibembe. Magical moments of the Olympics. Brought to you by SABC Sport, proud broadcaster of the Olympic Games Paris 2024.
For the love of the game.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
It's 19 minutes after 12. Now, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu says that addressing the scourge of crime in the Eastern and Western Cape provinces will be part of the key priorities that his department will keep a close eye on. Mchunu concluded his two-day ministerial stakeholder engagements in Gqeberha, which kicked off in the Western Cape on Saturday. Now, under-resourced police stations and a lack of police visibility topped the agenda in the Eastern Cape. SABC reporter Ntombozuko Balintulo filed this report.
Crime continues to spike in the area of Motherwell in Gqeberha, with murder, hijacking and gender-based violence being the leading crimes in the area. Nelson Mandela Bay, Buffalo City and Mthatha were highlighted as some of the epicenters of crime in the province, but Police Minister Senzo Mchunu has assured residents that they will work with other stakeholders to fight the crime in the province.
So we met commanders with a long discussion where we were assessing, among others, police stations, functionality and all of that. But then we met stakeholders. We are happy with the overall outcome, that people realize, they see themselves and feel that they are not safe and they are concerned about it. But what is good, they are prepared to do something about it. They want to meet us halfway. And on our side, not only are we prepared to fight crime, but it is our mandate. It is the mandate of the South African police to fight crime.
National Police Commissioner General Fani Masemola says additional resources will be allocated to the province, including over 300 additional police next month.
They said they will be deployed in. Currently, the problem we have is around Nelson Mandela Bay, around about the murder, extortion, gangs and drugs. So we are going to focus. We will not say the specific number is stuck on a specific station. So our model of deployment will depend, of course, on the operational commanders. But as you know, crime moves, so we'll move with whatever is happening here to make sure that we stabilize the whole area.
The police is calling for stringent and visible police enforcement and resources in communities in efforts to address the high crime rate. Resident Mandi Sanoman says the community is losing faith in the police.
Today, there is nothing that the minister can give us or tell us today because he has nothing. He was given whatever he was given by those that were there. But the main people are the ones that are outside here, that are not part of that. So I am saying, minister will hear. If a minister was in the stadium there, in Nelson Mandela Stadium, and listen to what the community is saying there, I'm sure that is the only time that the minister was going to have a planning of what to do in order to combat the crime within in Nelson Mandela Metro.
Beachfront Safety Chairman Sean Tapperman has called for more allocation of resources for community policing forum to assist in fighting crime.
And we're hoping that we will get the opportunity to raise things like the logistics issues of vehicles that are 500,000 kilometers, the tires are flat, their brakes don't work. We also have a situation where a lot of the stations are sitting at 60%, 70% in terms of their staff complements. Yet the communities over the last 5 years have grown in their areas.
During the 2023-2024 financial year, the Police Ministry has also allocated 70 million rand towards Community Police Forum nationally to ensure the proper functioning of these structures to combat crime. I am Ndombozuko Palindulo in Gqeberha.
23 minutes after 12. And turning our attention now to a different story. In fact, we were just keeping an eye on what's happening there in Parliament, but we've recorded that for you and we will play it back to you as soon as we can. Let's bring you up to speed with what's happening at the Judicial Conduct Tribunal that's been tasked with probing a complaint against suspended Judge Tintswalo Makubele. That, of course, currently underway in Rosebank here in Johannesburg. And it reconvened that hearing earlier this morning. The civil society organisation Unite Behind alleges that Makubele violated the separation of powers principle by being both a judge and a chairperson of a state-owned company at the same time. And also she is accused of allegedly advancing corruption and state capture. For more on this, we join on the line by our reporter following the story for us, Zoleka Kodashe. Zoleka, good afternoon. So kindly just give us a little bit more in terms of the background to these hearings, how they came about, and of course, what has come out so far this morning.
Good afternoon to the listeners. Well, you'll remember that essentially this matter started when, as you've correctly mentioned, civic organization #Unite Behind essentially launched a complaint after it was of the view that the now suspended Gauteng High Court Judge Tintswalo Makubele essentially occupied two roles when she was PRASA chairperson, as well as after she was appointed as a judge of the Gauteng bench. Now, you'll remember that this follows her interviews before the JSC for the position as a judge on the Gauteng bench in October 2017. Now, shortly after that, former President Jacob Zuma would then appoint her following the recommendation of the JSC to the Gauteng bench. But at the same time of October 2017, what also happened is that she occupied the chairperson position in PRASA as part of the interim board. Now, what has come out of the discussions or submissions today is essentially just closing arguments of what we've been following thus far since the start of the tribunal into probing her conduct and allegations of misconduct on the part of the suspended judge since 2019. And so that is really the crux of the matter, Sakina. Now, part of what has been submitted by the suspended judge is that, in fact, she had not taken her oath of office when she was appointed as a judge. Now, you remember, the Constitution says that a judicial officer, once they've been appointed, must take an oath of office, of course, to say that you will abide by the Constitution and you will not do anything to violate the Constitution. And so she had argued previously that this was not the case because she was not a judge at the time when she was a PRASA chairperson, and therefore because she didn't take her oath, she could not be considered as a judge, because in fact, before you can perform your judicial functions, you have to take the oath of office. And so she says that she did not take the oath and therefore she was not a judge. This despite the fact that the JSC did recommend her for the position and the former President Jacob Zuma did in fact appoint her as a judge. You'll remember, Sakina, that after the JSC makes such a recommendation to the President, of judicial officers or potential judicial officers are given a chance to relinquish any other position that they may hold, so as to avoid a conflict of interest, right? But what also is, I think, important in this matter is that there are allegations, or there was testimony from some of the witnesses that appeared before the tribunal, that when the suspended Judge Makhubele actually assumed her position as chairperson of PRASA in 2017, she also had allegedly vested interest in corruption-accused company CIA. In fact, one of the legal counsel for CIA at the time said that she had sought a meeting with him in relation to a settlement, and that also equates to aiding corruption. You'll remember that CIA at the time was involved in litigation with PRASA, and so that is some of the most important things I think that Unite Behind was complaining about, that essentially you are violating the separation of powers doctrine, but you're also playing an active role in aiding corruption, because you'll remember even when she was at PRASA, it's alleged that she then signed a settlement with CIA, much to the dismay of the legal team at PRASA at the time. And that is when the legal department at PRASA also blew the whistle in terms of what was going on at the time. So there's a lot that that the suspended judge is being accused of here before the tribunal.
Zoleka, as far as proceedings have gone today, who has spoken and what are we expecting to happen as the sitting continues?
Well, the person that has spoken is the evidence leader, Advocate Dorian Paver, who's essentially been delivering closing arguments and also poking holes into the submissions that have been made by suspended Judge Dinswalo Makhubele. Of course, as I've mentioned, the allegation that, of course, she wasn't a judge because she didn't take an oath of office and therefore could not assume her role as judge. And so I suppose there's a dispute there about when exactly a judicial officer would be considered to have been a judge. Is it when the president appoints you as a judge, or when you take your oath of office? Of course, she argues that because she didn't take her oath of office, then it means that she then would not be a judge. But I think also what's important, Sakina, is that this also is quite important in light of the fact that it could potentially lead to her impeachment, right? You'll remember that I think a pertinent question that was asked by Paver, the evidence leader, is what would a person that appears before or is tried before Judge Makhubele, should she not be found guilty, what would their take be in relation to, and this is now an objective take, what would their take be being tried by a judge that is accused of some of the serious allegations that the judge is accused of? And so it could lead to impeachment. And you'll remember, Sakina, that whatever comes out of this hearing will then, from the tribunal, will then be presented to the JSC. The JSC will then consider that and then send it to the National Assembly. If it makes an adverse finding against the judge, the suspended judge, then the National Assembly would then vote on it. For Makhubele to be removed as a judge, there would need to be a 2/3 majority of votes to remove her from the National Assembly for her to be impeached. Of course, this year we've already seen 2 judges being impeached, 2 senior judges being impeached, one of them being Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe, who is now no longer a judge. And so it, I suppose, would be also damning for Makhubele to be found wanting in that regard.
Zoleka, thanks so much for the update. Our reporter watching this Judicial Conduct Tribunal for us is Zoleka Kodashe. It's taking place here in Johannesburg in Rosebank. Right, it's time for headlines already. Here's Mudupi Makhalimele with your latest.
Thanks, SK, and good afternoon. In your headlines, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the GNU has agreed to respect the rule of law and protect the independence of institutions, including freedom of the media. Evidence leader at the probe looking into allegations of misconduct of the suspended Gauteng judge Tintswalo Nana Makubele has admitted that she threatened the independence of and public confidence in the judicial system. And a convicted murderer who killed dozens of black men during apartheid has claimed that the police sanctioned his violence. I'll be back with a full news update at 1.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
It's a Monday. Let's welcome Wayne McCurry. He's with FNB Wealth and Investments. Good afternoon, Wayne.
Yes, good afternoon. I must say, quite a nice start to the week. The market's up about just over 0.5% up, 2/3% up. And it's really right across the board with the industrials leading the way, but all the sectors are in fact up. So the shares on the upside today, Sasol up a very strong 6%, and that's on the back of a production update that they issued to the market, obviously very, very warmly accepted by the market. Other shares on the upside, Anglo-American Platinum, they came out with their actual results, which were probably slightly better than what the market was anticipating. That share up 3%. Then the two big industrials, Naspers and Prosus, both up around about 3%. And then Mr. Price, who also came with a sales update today, very, very strong numbers from them. Clearly, all of us are shopping down at Mr. Price in these economic conditions. That share up 2%. On the downside, South 32, which is a mining company, they've got a big aluminium mining operation in Australia. They mine bauxite that you make aluminium from. And they've applied to get an extension on the area that they're actually mining on. And the Australian government has put such onerous conditions on granting this permission to actually extend their mine that they said it's no longer viable at this price. So that share hammered 12% on that news, so very negative for the shares. Other shares down, a couple of gold shares down a little bit, Harmony 3%. On the indicators, Rand's trading more or less flat from Friday, trading at 18.27 against the dollar. Gold price falling a little bit, 14.04, and thank goodness Brent crude is still sitting at about $84 a barrel. So all in all, a good start to the week so far.
And we'll take that. Thanks so much, Wayne. Wayne McCurry is with FNB Wealth and Investments.
SAFM Sport with John Gerika.
Hello.
What a weekend.
Not as crazy as the previous weekend, but we'll take it.
They've all been crazy, which is good.
This
but
one was... Yeah.
We're in this week, though, before the Olympic Games.
This is
so, like, nothing is happening this week.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting to the games. They're testing out the cardboard beds.
Shame, man.
They're doing things in front of the Arc de Triomphe and the Arc de Triomphe.
Yeah.
And the Paris, what's the Paris Tower called? Eiffel Tower.
Eiffel Tower. And the river is called
the Seine.
Donkey.
You see, you missed the whole thing on Thursday and Friday, taking 2 days off. All right, let's talk about the weekend. Zonder Schauffele showed his class. He came to two-stroke victory at the Open. It was at Royal Troon in Scotland. England's Justin Rose, American Billy Horschel were shared second. They were on 7 under. It's the second major win of the year for Schauffele after he won the PGA Championship in May.
It means a lot. It's something all of us play for, and it really is a dream come true to be holding this, and it definitely hasn't sunk in yet. You know, my brain is still grinding on this amazing property here, just trying to get through the holes. So I can't wait to sit back and have a moment with this Clare jug.
South African Thurston Lawrence fired a 3 under final round 68. He ended 4th on 6 under overall, 3 strokes behind the winner.
I think I did pretty well out there. I didn't actually put myself under the pressure that some people are supposed to. I just looked at it as a normal Sunday of a normal golf tournament. Yes, it is the Open, it is a bigger stage, but being in that moment, I felt so calm. It felt like a normal Sunday, me trying to win a golf tournament, trying to be creative, and I managed to accomplish that, so very proud of myself.
To France, today Pogacar won the 24 Tour de France yesterday, adding a third overall title to his 2020 and 21 crowns. 25-year-old won the final day's time trial with defending champion Jonas Vingegaard coming second at 1 minute 3 seconds on the day. Astonishingly, Pogacar won 6 stages on this edition of the Tour de France, just as he did when winning the 24 Giro as well. Now he'll focus on the Olympic Games. But Biniam Girmay became the first black African to claim a classification in the Tour de France. The Eritrean secured the sprinters green jersey competition, also the first black African to win a stage at the race. You remember we covered that. He also won stages 3, 8 and 12.
I'm just super happy for the future of Africa and for the future of cycling, because the more it goes, more international or global sport is more nice. It's more beautiful to see on the peloton a different color from different country and different continents. So I'm just super happy to be part of that, and then to see myself on this history way. Just what can I say? Just like from the past historical moment, today was really special.
Tennis news: world number 51 Nuno Borges beat Rafael Nadal 6-3, 6-2 to win the Swedish Open in Bastad. Hampering by injury in recent years, Nadal's fallen to 261 in the world rankings. He opted against playing in Wimbledon ahead of the Olympic Games. Borges explains the pressure he was feeling in the final.
With Rafa on the other side, I had to basically put a blindfold on that and just play him like just any other player. And that was the trickiest part of today. Also, being my first final, a lot on the line for me, maybe not that much for him, but I'm sure he really wanted to win as well, because I know he's a big fighter, and throughout this week he proved that.
After a strong season, Jaguar have claimed the Formula E Teams Championship after a thrilling race in London under the guidance of team principal James Barkley. Who is James Barkley? Barkley is the first South African team principal to guide a team to a Formula E World Championship. He used to live around Kyalami. He went up to Pretoria, spent a lot of time up at the racetrack up there. He led the team, Jaguar, since 2016, and he's been at the helm ever since.
When we created this team, it was about winning world championships, and that's exactly where we are now. So incredibly proud. We've done a phenomenal job this season, and we're justifiable world champions. So incredibly proud.
And finally, Oscar Piastri has moved up to 5th in the Formula 1 driver standings. He won his maiden Formula 1 main race at the Hungarian Grand Prix yesterday. Teammate Lando Norris slowed down in the closing laps to let the Australian through for the win. Norris closed the gap on leader Max Verstappen to just 76 points. The Red Bull driver managed only 5th with a poor drive yesterday. Ferrari pairing of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz are 3rd and 4th. Norris didn't seem happy to give Piastri the race win while on track, but he was talking the team line afterwards.
Yeah, happy for the team. I don't know when our last 1-2 in the race was, but probably over 10 years ago or something. So just super happy. I mean, I'm happy for Oscar too. Like your first, I know he won in Qatar, but I think he'll also say that this win is a lot more than a sprint win. So his first proper win, it's a special moment. So happy for him and for the whole team. An incredible weekend for all of us. Just super happy.
It's like everybody was in a bad mood.
He's lying. He was not happy at all.
He wasn't happy. Lewis Hamilton wasn't happy because he got crashed into by Max Verstappen, who wasn't very happy. There's also visuals of Fernando Alonso.
Who was at fault?
That was Max. It was Max.
It was Max.
As a Max's fault, you can't deny.
And then he's at fault, and you even hear the commentator saying, Max hit Lewis.
Yeah.
And Max is now angrier than everybody else. Like, really.
And I saw Fernando Alonso as well. He didn't weigh himself properly. After the race, they weigh themselves with their helmets and things to make sure it's all legal. And he had already taken off his kit and he'd put a jacket on. And he was asked to be weighed. And there's a picture of him like throwing his hat and throwing his jacket at the marshal. So it's like every single person was in a bad mood in Hungary.
It was absolutely crazy because Lando Norris must be angry at his team.
Yes.
Who told him to make way for Piastri.
Verstappen was just angry at everybody.
Verstappen, I don't know what's wrong with Verstappen. Like, Max Verstappen has no personality. Like, if it's there, I'm finding it hard to